Anita, are you there? I know she is. I just talked to her, so she should be.
Yes, I am here. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. We'll go ahead and start with roll call.
Ames City Council,
Here.
Present.
Story County Board of Supervisors,
Here.
Ames School Board,
Here.
Gilbert School Board, United School Board, Nevada School Board.
Here. All right. Thank you. Moving on to item number 2, motion approving meeting minutes of January 28th, 2023. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes? Any corrections?
I have final question. The January 28th is at the top. It says of the minutes. It says January 24th.
It's 24. It's 24 on the minutes and 28 on the agenda.
Right.
Oh,
Yep, should have been 24. It is posted, or the minutes I have here to sign does say January 24th, so the agenda's wrong. All right, for January 24th. Is there any amendments to the minutes? If not, entertain a motion to approve.
Move approval?
All right, moved by supervisors.
Second.
By Ames City Council. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. All right, public hearing on the Ames City Assessor's proposed budget for FY 2023-2024. Any questions, first of all, for the city assessor? Any comments? Sherry?
The budget was published on the 15th of February, which is within the timeline of 10 to 20 days before the meeting. I did have an email from Carrie Johnson from the Department of Management concerning Senate File 181 that was passed. The budgets that are in there, they do not need to be republished or another meeting as long as the budget does not reach the statutory rate maximum. And this budget will not. There will be an adjustment after the county auditor refigures the taxable valuation. So the levy rate will change, but the tax askings do not. And that is the reason that we do not need to republish.
Okay. Everyone clear on that? You probably all are knowing exactly what she's talking about. All right, I will declare the public hearing on the Ames City Assessor's proposed budget for FY 23-24 to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address conference board on the proposed budget? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing to be closed, and seeing no public input and no questions from the conference board, I entertain a motion to approve the proposed budget.
Move approval?
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. All right. Move on to item number 4. Do you have anything you want to share with us? Otherwise, I will say this, that I have been totally consumed with property tax legislation, and this kind of fell through the cracks. Does anyone have someone that they would recommend that I could contact on behalf? Otherwise, I will put that on top of my list to do in the next few days to try and get somebody for the board's consideration. And we may need to do a quick meeting to approve that member in the near future. And when do you do your training, Sherry?
The Board Review School, there are 2 schools. Both of them are at the end of March. One is, I believe, on the 31st. And I forget when the other one is, but I believe it's full anyway. The board does meet on the 1st of May, so the person would need to be in place by May 1st at the latest.
So the schools are already closed though, and you would just train them yourself then? Or?
Yes, there is one open. I don't know how many seats they have left available right now, but there were 2, but the other one is full.
What's the date for the one that would be open? Do you know?
I believe March 31st.
Oh, that's the one's open. Okay.
And what are the criteria? Is there a slot we're filling here?
Well, you have to have at least one person that has some real estate background or.
which
and
we do.
Which we actually have
Mhm.
several that have that. So
Yes.
that's good news. We have
It-
multiple.
If a person could be found in the construction business or architecture type business, that would be probably the one that we are lacking. We do have somebody who is a farmer, so that we don't need, and we don't have that much ag land in the city anyway, so it would be probably better if we had somebody who knew more about building costs and building replacement costs and what today's market is. So. Other than that, the person would not have to be in one of those categories as long as they are a resident of Ames and have at least some working knowledge of what property is being bought and sold for and what market value is.
Are there any kind of conflicts, potential conflicts we should stay away from?
Anybody who would be like one of the board members could not.
Mhm.
Anybody who would be outside of, I mean, you have to be within city of Ames resident. So, but other than that, there really aren't a lot of conflicts with this board. We are already gender balanced, so that is not anything that we need to be concerned about.
Probably the conflict will only be, that's a really good question, because if you have someone who's, say, an architect whose business is designing buildings that in Ames that may be potentially under review, I guess they could abstain,
Correct.
but you're trying.
The
to
same
avoid
thing
that.
happens with realtors. Because realtors have to be within the city too, so.
What about reaching out to Iowa State Architecture College?
We could. I think that what you're looking for is someone who's actually practicing in the field, that would actually trying to have an understanding. And believe me, that's pretty hard to
That
do
would
right
help, but
now.
I was thinking about the conflict issue.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
That's why I was thinking
Yeah.
about an academic, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'll give it some thought.
Okay. That's helpful and kind of plays in my wheelhouse a little better too. So, okay. All right. Let's move on to item number 5, unfinished business. Update on lawsuit and appeals.
Okay, so we learned last week that the alumni of Alpha Gamma Rho did dismiss their case. They wanted to settle with us, and we said no. I was in contact with Mark and the attorneys that were representing us, and they decided not to go forward anymore. So that has been dismissed. I do have 5 others that we are working with to possibly settle, and I'm working with Mark on those as well from the city legal department. And they are all either 2 of them have been converted from condos to the apartment building, back to apartment buildings, and 2 of them have not, and one of them is a strip mall. So, and with the change in the rollback that now matches residential, that's one of the reasons why they made that switch back to apartment buildings, because they'll get a better value as a whole building instead of having a value individual condos. So we're working on those.
After those 5 are
I
addressed,
think there's 7 left yet.
then after that, or you have 7 total, 5 of which you're working on right now.
We have 12 open right now.
Okay.
So there are 7 left after this.
Okay. Questions? All right. Staffing update.
We do have our temp employee that I've had since last August. I hired her as my appraisal clerk, who would be basically doing what Dan has been doing now. She is going full-time, so I have opened that up to get another temp employee back in. I've been working with HR to get the notice out in the paper, and also for a board of review secretary, because the board does need its a separate secretary. It cannot be somebody from the office. It either has to be a board member or a secretary, and they would prefer that they have their own secretary. So both of those should be coming out shortly. And then after we get that done, and in between appeals, we will also be we're going to try again to see what we have for people that are out there that may possibly want to be a deputy in the office. So still working on that one as well.
Questions? All right, update on assessment notices.
Our assessment notices are due to go to the printers on March 20th. There will be a letter sent with the notices that will kind of explain what has been happening with the market and just in general what real estate has been doing. Hopefully that will kind of alleviate some of the increases that we're going to be seeing. This is not specific to Ames, the increases, because this is happening all across the state of Iowa. So, there are probably going to be other counties that will see similar increases. I'm looking at probably somewhere between 17 and 30% on commercial, about 17 and about 30% or so on residential. We're still doing a lot of reviews on the parcels, so we will not have those values ready to go probably until the day before we have to get them sent out to get in the mail. It is being done by an outside service, so it takes them a few days to get those printed. And then that insert will be there with that letter. I will be sending out the letter to everybody so that everybody has that in advance. I'm also going to have a meeting with city staff on March 29th in the afternoon for any of the city staff that may have questions or possibly get phone calls because of all of these assessment notices going out. We are going to be sending out a notice to every single property or for every single property. So we're going to be sending out just shy of 22,000 notices. That will happen on the afternoon of March 29th, and it's open to any city staff. I'm also going to let the board review know, and you all can come, and anybody else that we could possibly think of to try and get the word out about what these increases are going to really look like when we come down to the taxable value. So,
So are there any
It's-
links that we can provide people who might have questions? There are some really good resources out there
yes.
that would help them understand not only the appeal process, but also how real estate taxes are done in Iowa.
Yes. So when everything gets ready to be mailed out, all of the information on the website will also be updated. So we have that information available. And part of that letter is also going to be the address where you would see on the website where you would go to find information. So everybody will have that with their assessment notice.
Okay, thanks.
What are other assessors doing in addition to what you're talking about to try and get out ahead of it?
Well,
I think we're going to see an avalanche.
some
across
will
the
be
state.
contacting, their local papers or the local radio stations, TV stations. And as part of this, we will be also doing that as well. So we can kind of get out a little bit ahead of this and try and educate people so that they understand this whole process. I'm sure that it will be new to some people because they've never owned property before. So, which is a good reason to send out notices every year, I feel, so that people are used to seeing those notices and are used to seeing what the value is. And if they do disagree, that they have that option to appeal their assessment or at least come in and talk to us and make sure that their information on their property is correct.
If any of us get phone calls, I'm sure we may get emails too. What would you recommend? How to proceed?
I would prefer that everybody have them contact us or forward those information from your email or whatever to us so that we can respond. There are just a lot of different possibilities of what could have happened to that property, that it's just not a blanket answer.
Mhm.
It could be, anything from new construction, or maybe there was something that was missed for years. We've found all kinds of things that we are trying to get updated on those records. And of course, it'll be a continuous process going forward for the next 4 years while we start to actually review them door to door and get that information updated. So this is just a very basic base level assessment right now because of everything getting put into that new computer system. So the new software.
All right. Any questions? New business, item 6. You have anything for us? Any questions for Sherry? All right, well, that made for a short meeting. Conference board comments. Joe, anything for us tonight?
No comments.
All right, thank you. Linda?
Thank you, nothing.
Rich?
For me.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
All right.
And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, good evening. Call the regular meeting of the Ames City Council to order for February 28th. Welcome, everybody. Council, it's my pleasure tonight to introduce Tabitha Etten. She is our new ex officio, first evening. And I told her that all these people came just to see her. I did warn her that we had a really nice event coming up. So anyway, and Councilmember Rollins is joining us virtually tonight. Anita, you there? She's there. I know she is. All right.
Yes, I'm here.
All right. There you go. Thank you. All right. So we're going to kick it off with a recognition of the Fitch Family Aquatic Center donors. Well, first of all, I just want to welcome everybody and just acknowledge this has been a long time coming, and it's such an exciting project and just really an important thing for our community. And just first of all, I want to thank the council for your vision and your support, and you can all read their names. And we also have some other elected officials in the audience. We have Lisa Heddens and Latifa Faisal and Linda Merkin, supervisors. Anybody else that I'm missing that's elected officials? I think that's it. So anyway, this is a great way for us to repurpose public land that on the DOT site and provide a really important quality of life amenity that's going to feature 3 warm water pools. And the basins will be used for swim lessons, exercise classes, water walking, lap swimming, open recreation, and more. And as I was thinking about this afternoon, we're going to be having over $10.4 million donated, which essentially is a third of the cost of the project by private entities, and 42 individuals and businesses have donated or committed that money to this project. I just think that's an amazing show of support by our community for a really exciting project. So I'm going to introduce Keith Abraham, the Parks and Recreation Director. He's going to give a project overview, and then we're going to go ahead and recognize donors and ask them to come up in front in a few minutes. So Keith.
Thank you, Mayor. So we do have a couple of Parks and Recreation Commission members here I'd like to introduce. We have Rachel Kramer. Go ahead and wave, Rachel. And Nathan Shamanik, 2 of our 6 commissioners. And just like with council, I would thank them for their support and vision for this project as well. So with just to give you a quick little update, so the city did purchase the DOT property where this is going to go, just north of Lincoln Way between Oak and Elm. We purchased that land on January 5th, and it is now the city's property. So as far as the project, we will do aquatics is the main focus of the project. It'll have the 3 basins like the mayor had mentioned, and then we will also hopefully we're going to bid it as an ad alternate, but we'll have a walking track and multi-purpose space. So we're still working on that, hoping that bids come in favorable. Really working with RDG, who's our architect on this project, and Story Construction, who's going to be serving as a construction manager. Really working with them to try to design an affordable, energy efficient, easy to maintain building. And Pat's kind of chuckling here, but hopefully we'll be able to get that accomplished. So as far as a timeline, so we're in the design phase right now. We're finishing up schematic, and we're hoping to bring a schematic design and cost estimates to council at the end of March, and then bid the project in November, award in December, demolish the buildings in January of 24, and then start construction in April of 24 with the building opening hopefully in November of 25. So that right now is we're hanging to that schedule. And then I just really, the mayor's going to go through and read all the donors, but I just want to really say thank you to everybody who has donated to this project. It means a lot to the community, to the users, to staff, and it's something that we don't have right now. the indoor warm water aquatic center. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'll turn it back to the mayor.
So on behalf of the city council, it's my great pleasure to recognize each of the donors who have made this amazing project come to fruition. I also want to thank and recognize the efforts of Dan Culhane, President and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, for his role in securing donations for this project. When we needed someone to step up, Dan said, yes, I'd be happy to do that, and we really appreciate that. So when I read your name, would you please come up front to be recognized? And after all the names are read, please stay up front. We'll take some pictures, and let's just hold your applause too, so till the end of the time. So we have two amazing donors that have contributed $3 million or more each, and that's Rich and Mary Fitch, and Mary Greeley Medical Center, represented by Brian Deidre. If you come up front, please.
Yeah, you just want to right up here, just stand right behind Jerry. Get close together.
That's right, you might get a little comfy here. In the category for $500,000 to $2 million, we have Fairway Corporation, Winokur Estate, and the Story County Board of Supervisors. One or all of you want to come up? It's up to you. Anybody from Fairway or from the Winokur? They passed away a while back. $100,000 and up, Pat Brown, Pete and Marnie Buck, Warren and Bev Madden, and the Underwood Family Foundation. $50,000 are up, Ag Certain, Dan. First National Bank, Todd and Sargent, including Philip and Susan Sargent, Dan and Pam Sargent, John and Emily Sargent, Amy and Corey Schmidt, and Chuck and Deb Winkleblack. In the $20,000 to $25,000 category, we have Ames Ford Lincoln, Avela Bank, Burke Corporation, Dean Hunziker, McFarland Clinic, and Story Construction. And $10,000 to $20,000, Pat and Louis Bannett, Friedrich Realty, Greater Iowa Credit Union, Hastings Garten Law Group, LLP, Haverkamp Properties, Michael Kitchell, Northwest Bank, John and Susie Sherholtz, and U.S. Bank. And $500 to $5,000, we have Sheila Baker, Jay Brown, Therese Halber, Henkel Construction, Tracy Kangas, Roger and Mary Jo Klusner, Jay and Margaret Munson, Larry Odman, Beth Suley, Technical Services, Inc., TS Bank, and Vision Bank. So it's just amazing to see how many individuals, corporations have come together to make this project a reality. And on behalf of City Council, thank you very much. So Susan gets really, really pushy. So if we just do what she says, we'll all be really happy.
Stand up
Sure.
and a bunch together right here.
What are we doing?
Over here.
I don't care, but.
Right, do we kneel on
This is.
All right.
Steve.
You're never gonna see me. I'm not a tall person.
Okay,
What if I stand?
this works. I got everybody. Okay.
Right.
It's fun.
How do we go? Did we already do that? Yeah. Okay. I can never remember. It's been so long. Let's clap again while they're finding the seats.
Couldn't see, but I want to know who was left in the audience.
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Rich Fitch, representing the Fitch family, and I've asked him and also Brian Dieter, President and CEO of the Mary Greeley Medical Center, to offer a few remarks before we conclude our ceremony. So, Rich, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council, members of council. Thank you, citizens. Appreciate it. I'd like to introduce my family, my wife, Mary, my son, Nick, and our two daughters, Holly and Jenna. We're very fortunate with this opportunity came along to build this new aquatic center after the Healthy Life Center did not happen. We are honored in the name that you named it, the Fitch Family Aquatic Center, after us. We believe that Ames needs this indoor aquatic center to pair up with the Donald and Ruth Furman Aquatic Center. That way the city will have an aquatic center that can be used and enjoyed all year round for all the citizens in Ames and Central Iowa. And we can be proud of this state-of-the-art facility for generations to come. I want to thank all the other donors that donated to this project. And it was great. So we really appreciate it. And thank you all.
So on behalf of the medical center, I was reminded before we started at our reception, one of my friends who was involved in the ask said, "We'll just pull the string in the back of your suit and you'll just talk about the hospital." And but I really want to catch what Rich said. We were fortunate at the time that the ask came in to be able to say yes. We had been involved, as many of you know, in a lot of the work that led to the ballot initiative of the Healthy Life Center. We believed strongly in the need to be able to provide a recreational facility to all in our community. And with the city's ownership and leadership and their strong parks program, the ability of all to be able to utilize it, whether it is through scholarships or funding subsidy for people who might not ordinarily be able to afford such a beautiful aquatic center as what's planned. So we're fortunate to be able to respond. I think back to the originating words that Captain Wallace Greeley said at the hospital dedication. It gives us great pleasure, more than words can express, to be able to do this, not only for those here now, but for those who will be here long after we have all perished. And so to be able to take another leap forward, just over 100 years after Captain Greeley built and gifted the hospital to the city, felt really right to us. So we're pleased to be among this incredible group of donors that the mayor has listed for us. And council, thank you. We know that you will shepherd the gift quite well. I love to see that Tim's got some skin in the game personally as well. So thanks a ton. And Anita, it would be really nice to be able to see you. I miss you. Take care, everyone.
Well, in my opinion, I think that Ames is the envy of Iowa. $10.5 million being donated. And the other thing is that we have, with the hopefully the upcoming, soon to be realized link project that going through, that could potentially contribute an additional $10 million to this project. So just imagine if that, when that all comes to fruition, our taxpayers would pay only a third of the overall cost of the project. So it's a great public-private partnership. We thank you, donors, for all of your commitments. And so I'm just going to let city council members, if you have any comments, I'll start with Gloria and go around and see if anybody wants to add anything before we conclude this donor recognition ceremony. Gloria?
I just want to thank everybody who has contributed and also acknowledge that there's still time if anyone else wants to contribute. I think it's a wonderful project and it shows community spirit. Thank you very much.
I would just echo all the things that have already been said. As the mayor noted, this is a long time coming, and it's just great that so many of you and so many in the community have bought into this project, and I'm excited to open the doors here in a few years.
Rachel?
I would agree with all of what's been said, and hope you all come back in November 2025 when it's open.
Yeah, same. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your generosity. And, I'm just another reason to be proud of living in Ames. So.
Anita, do you want to add anything?
I echo what's been said, as well as Brian. Good to see you as well.
All right. With that.
Mayor, one more.
No, wait, I passed you.
Yeah, I know.
This is the story of my life in council.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Tim.
It's true. It's true. I want to just take a quick second and acknowledge we got here in large part because of the hard work of our staff. And so Keith and Brian and Keith, all of your staff, you just have to know we have gold for city staff. And Steve is really a lot to be. We were very grateful for Steve's leadership in how he's put his team together. But I want to specifically call out Keith and his staff, and Brian Phillips particularly for their hard work in this. So, how about a round of applause for Dan Cohen and our staff?
Thank you, Tim. Well said. We do have outstanding staff and makes our job pretty easy. Well, kind of easy, not too easy. Anyway, all right. With that concludes the recognition ceremony. Thank you all for coming, and I presume there's probably more food and drink out there to partake in, but we have some things to take care of. So have a good evening. Thank you.
I mean, unless you want to stay and watch. No.
Thank you.
I feel like everything he was there to talk about in my meeting with Steve was, I don't care about that one either. Yeah, I know.
Where's the Billy Sun? I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. I was supposed to move something and now
I was maybe gonna put 10, just to explain why we're sending the resolution.
no. I was gonna.
All right. Council, we are working from an amended agenda this evening. The changes include on item number 12, you should read resolution approving final plans and specifications and awarding contract, and there's no changes after that. And item 15 should read resolution approving change order number 1 to HTH Companies, Inc. of Union, Missouri in the amount of $95,000. It was incorrectly stated as $245,000 in the agenda. And staff has asked to pull item number 6. That will come back to council in the near future, but that is not included in consent. So does council wish to pull any other items from consent tonight?
Should I pull item 10?
Item 10. Anything else? Okay, to entertain a motion to approve consent as amended and less item 6 and less item 10.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Rachel, question?
So could you just give a little background on why we're rescinding the original resolution and what we're setting for the hearing?
Certainly. The original resolution called for all the lots, and we kind of jumped a little ahead. Habitat had to step back and wait till all the paperwork came for their grant. So that's why we pulled the other lots out. And then one of the lots, Lot 8, is the one they're going to do out of house, out of their own funds. And so that will be coming, but we have to just abide by the grant that they're going to get for the other lots. And so that's why we had to make this adjustment.
Perfect.
Okay, any other questions? I entertain a motion on resolution rescinding resolution number 23-047 and resolution setting March 14, 2023 as date of public hearing for sale of Lot 8 to Habitat for Humanity of Central Iowa.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. We'll move on to public forum. This is time we set aside for comments from the public on topics of city business other than those listed on the agenda. And I would ask people if they could try and limit their comments to 3 to 5 minutes. And I have one card right now we'll start with, and that's from Susan Kramer. So you're welcome to come to the podium if you just want to acknowledge your name, and then you may proceed.
Thank you. I'm Susan Kramer with the Ames Interfaith Refugee Alliance, or ERA, and I'm just here just to inform you of kind of what the group has been up to. ERA was established in 2016 to originally help Syrian refugees, and then that program was closed. So we ended up helping some South Sudanese refugees that were already in the community, and then a new family that moved here. Then when the war in Ukraine started last year, ERA helped welcome Ukrainian refugees to Ames. There are currently 31 Ukrainians representing 12 families in Ames. The U.S. government coordinates the United for Ukraine program, which provides basic documents and benefits for Ukrainian refugees. Sponsors in Ames assist with documentation and offer a welcome, but they're not legally held responsible. Local hosts provide housing and basic needs until the refugees can live in Ames independently. ERA has many volunteers who are eager to welcome more Ukrainians. ERA volunteers help with all aspects of adjusting to life in Ames, including English tutoring, school enrollment, job searches, medical connections, and transportation. We continue to help refugees in the Ames area, and as additional programs are developed to assist people from other parts of the world, we will try to be of assistance. Thank you for your time. Do you have any questions or comments?
It's just an amazing thing. And I appreciate you coming tonight. I thought it'd be helpful for the community to hear about what you've been doing. And I just think it speaks very well for the character of Ames, and we appreciate the work that you're doing and will be doing, and keep us posted on ways in which we as a city can be welcoming to those who are fleeing a very difficult situation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Does anybody else want to address council? Grant?
Grant Olson, 3812 Ontario Street. An item that's been on the previous agendas and will be on future agendas is some safety improvements in the Somerset area. And I just wanted to bring forward some data as we discuss this in the future. Thinking about what that block of staying would look like between Aspen Road and Northridge Parkway, and envisioning what that might look like, and thinking we have parking along here and how much parking is available in the area. So I went to Google Earth and I picked out, they're basically randomized. It was the 4 most recent images from Google Earth. And I manually counted how many unused parking spaces there were in each of the 4 years. And I'm sorry, this is a little bit difficult to see, but going in chronological order from older to newer, years 2015, 2017, 2019, the green line essentially represents the pandemic, and then a data point from about 8 months ago. And for empty off-street parking spots in Somerset. So if you look at the, this would be the side with the 2 restaurants. And then I also counted this lot here on the other side of Stang. And those data points as far as empty off-street parking spaces, 206, one's in the 170s right before the pandemic. And again, about 207 empty parking spots in the most recent data point. So just wanted to bring that to you as we talk about what the new Stang looks like between Aspen Road and Northridge Parkway. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public forum and move on to item number 19, resolution approving selection of partner developer in connection with low-income housing tax credit proposals for the Baker subdivision.
Good evening. Before you, as we talked about at the last council meeting, is our process that you approved us to go out and solicit for a new RFP to do low-income tax credit apartments at the lot 27 at the Baker subdivision. So as a result of that request, we received 2 proposals, one from the Commonwealth Companies and one from Hatch Development Group. And those proposals were made available on our website for yourself and the public to view. They were just too big to kind of mail out. Also, we created an evaluation committee that was to be responsive to the RFP, and we outlined several criteria based on that, the RFP, which was track record, history, percentage of affordable housing, their performer feasibility, and also since we had decided to go to the 9% credit, we wanted to also look at their potential EIFEL score. Since you have a 9% credit is competitive, and so we wanted to make sure that we had proposals that would be hopefully fundable under that 9% credit. So we met, we received the proposals, we went through a written process, and we also interviewed both of the groups, and the committee scored them out of numerous of variety of criteria that we mentioned earlier. And the final scores were that the Commonwealth Company scored 625 points out of 850, and Hatch Development Group scored 740 points out of 850. And what you have on the screen tonight to kind of give you a summary of the both proposals is we looked at the self-scoring, and out of this particular category, IFA, out of their qualifying QAP, they call it, which they lay out all the guidelines and qualifications, it was kind of challenging to also have the proposals meet that QAP so they could score high, and also try to meet what we had laid out in our request for proposals. And so I think both companies did a good job trying to balance that. So as you can see, the Hatch Development Group, their self-score was 48 out of 59, and the Commonwealth was also 48 out of 59. There were some points in the QAP that Ames would not qualify for at all. And then there was some that was basically going to be based on IFA's determination whether they met. So they ended up both being the same when we looked at them. And also as far as the type and style of units, the Hatch Development Group proposed 38 units, of which 16 would be 2 bedrooms, 18 would be 3 bedroom units, and 4 would be 4 bedroom units. And the Commonwealth Group, they proposed 45 units, 9 1-bedroom units, 10 2-bedroom units, 23 bedroom units, and 6 4-bedroom units. In regards to utilities, the Hatch Group would include all the utilities in the rent, and on the Commonwealth, the owner would pay water, sewer, and trash, and the tenants would be responsible for electricity. Some notable features of both proposals we outlined under Hatch group, they identified a amenity area for to have playground equipment and sold things for the residents. They also talked about Energy Star appliances, dishwashers. They would install electric vehicle charging stations and some dedicated on-site recycling. Whereas Commonwealth Group proposed a pergola, covered picnic area, planting gardens, a playground equipment, a community center with fitness center, business center, computer lab, in-unit laundry, Energy Star appliances as well, video system, high-speed internet, and they both offered on-site maintenance, and they both offered on-site management companies. When you look at these notable features and you look at the QAP, IFA kind of really changed how they did the QAP. You get a lot of points. You can go through a lot of points to get certain things. So you can get points for having the playground equipment. You can get points for going energy efficient. They really kind of open up a lot of things that you could score well on. So you get to choose a lot of things that you would end up getting the same points. They also offered options for income levels to get the highest points, which was 30 points that you could score. They offered you could score at the number of units at 30% or less, the number of units you did at 40%. And they also did where you can do rent reduction. So you could choose one of those options. They also had two options that we didn't qualify for, which was project-based rental assistance being available, which we don't have as part of our housing authority. So that was never going to be an option for the city of Ames. And as far as the two proposals, the Hatch Group chose the rent reduction option, and the Commonwealth Group chose serving 40% of the income resident option. So they both would score 30 points, but you just get to choose which one you want to use. Under the Hatch proposal, that they would be serving 50 to 60% of the area median residents, and 100% of the rents would remain at the 40% medium income area. Under the Commonwealth, they were going to be serving 24%, 11 of the residents at the 40% of the AMI, and the remaining 70%, which would be about 34 residents, at the 60 to 80%. So what they've done is they would income average those at the 80 to those at the 30, and you have to average at 60. And so that's why you see the difference between the two based on those particular options. Their construction schedules were very similar. The project costs, where you had the Hatch Group came in just over 12 million, and the Commonwealth Group just over 16 million. And proposed financing was just for Hatch Development just over 9 million, and the Commonwealth Group just over 10 million. Both proposals proposed to use all of our $1.8 million that we would be contributing to the project. And then under Hatch Development, they also are proposing to apply for $500,000 of state home funds, where the Commonwealth Group was just part of their financing. And also they both went for us donating the land at no cost. So that was there. Thank you. As you can see, their construction financing, both of them would have lenders that they have reached out to and they work with to do their construction financing and their budget as well. And also, when we looked at the experience, we looked at projects that they had done in multiple areas, as Hatch has developed over 500 units in Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, Newton, Winterset, Dubuque, Waverly, Clinton. They've done some historic preservation renovations in Newton, and they've done projects in Sioux City. Well, the Commonwealth Group, they have done developments in 21 states, just over 127 multifamily projects. They do have 2 projects in Iowa. They have completed a Bondurant for 40 mid-rise that will start in the spring of this year. And then they did a 62 senior complex in Johnston a couple of years ago. And then they both have architects they've already have commitments to. They both have construction contractors that are in place. Commonwealth is in-house, and the Hatch Group, they have a long-term agreement with their construction contractor. And like I said earlier, both of them will provide on-site management and on-site maintenance on their properties. And that's kind of how we kind of help try to get people to see what the differences were between the two projects. Now, we also can show you the layouts. Let's start with Commonwealth. Okay, as you can see, they've proposed 3 buildings, and their parking lot and their amenities would be in the center of the development complex. And they've kind of outlined the garden area, the playground equipment area, and the clubhouse, I believe, is on the largest one to the, no, I think it's the other one. Yes. It is where they would include their clubhouse. And they have also, and I'm gonna let Kelly talk a little bit about this because the design features and architect is more of his command than it is mine, and I don't want to mess that up.
So if you recall, when they submitted for the 4% project in the fall, it was a little more of a plain design than this. They said at the budget with the 4% LIHTC, they couldn't add some of the aesthetic elements that we were asking for some projections and then for some stone accents. So in this project, they have brought that onto the buildings. I think with what you see here with the 3-story building is they have some relief to that building to kind of separate it into 3 main masses. A lot of the units still have individual doors acting as townhome units. It's really the apartment units that are in the 3-story component itself. That building is situated towards the detention pond side of the site. So then when you go to the street and when you go to the single family side of the project, they're doing 1-story buildings. So this has the same type of features as the main building, but it's pretty uniform in its appearance and height. It doesn't have as much interest as the larger building, and but it's mimicking those same design features across the site. So it does have the ability to have front doors towards the street, which we've prioritized, but it is a pretty low scale in terms of building. So it's very, very similar to heights of single family homes. It's just that the length of the building is quite long with how this is laid out as a 1-story building. Again, on the site, pretty much it looks to, as a concept plan, it looks to meet zoning standards. Tonight, later on the agenda, you're approving a PUD for this site to allow for council approval of a site plan once the final project is selected. It meets those intent. There's some tweaks related to parking and probably some other little features that need to be adjusted as you get into final design. But for all intensive purposes, this concept is probably buildable as presented. And then you want to go to any questions on this part, or you want to see Hatch next? Okay. So here's the Hatch site. Again, we've seen a lot of iterations on the site, so they all probably look pretty familiar. This version is 100% townhome oriented, meaning that each unit is 2 stories. There's no unit above any of the units in this plan. So what we see here is 38 units, surface parking to serve all of those units. As Vanessa mentioned, the open space isn't as defined. They have one outlined area on the east side for some amenity space, and then the site falls away pretty quickly to the south edge. So even though you see some green space there behind those homes, that's not flat green space. It would really be a sloped area. So that's something that you probably shouldn't look at as like active usable space. It's more just open space on the site. So the design approach is a little bit different with Hatch. They definitely looked at it as approaching it from an individual townhome kind of identification approach. So each unit is basically the same in its appearance. Each one gets a covered entry, has that gabled front component to identify that it's a unit for someone. But that building architecture is repeated for all 38 units. So they're all the same throughout the project with what you see. And you see a very traditional approach with a brick base, some vertical siding as an accent material, and then a little bit of relief with the roof form here versus the one-story version you saw in Commonwealth. But pretty much a standard, traditional looking, very traditional residential townhome appeal here in this project. So one thing about this site is we noted, sorry, I just flipped. I'm not sure where I just went. With the site plan, as we noted in the report, it's parked at 1.5 spaces per unit, where the code would allow you to go down to as few as 2 spaces per unit. And the access point should be flipped to the east side of the site to line up with Latimer Lane across the way. So really this concept needs to be adjusted to be able to move forward. And we noted that in alternative one. It's alternative one. If you pick the Hatch project, there's an update to the concept necessary to deal with likely zoning issues for the property. So I think they've indicated that they would move quickly on submitting an updated concept if they were picked. We would need to see that to go ahead with a development agreement. And they're aware of this. They've been given feedback from the RFP team that there's some basic zoning issues that they would still have to address. Anything else?
Okay, in the report, we kind of lined out what we felt was our pluses on each proposal. Under Commonwealth, we talked about the experience that they had overall, even though they just have 2 properties in Iowa. The clubhouse addition, that specified recreational area, the in-house construction and management divisions, the improved material design from their previous ones, the increased number of units, and then the on-site management team as well. And some of the concerns we had was the addition of 1 bedrooms, which we were concerned because we had been designating this as a family project. And then the only 11 units would be set aside at the 40%, and having the income average between 50 and 80, which is kind of the top of the income limit for HUD, is the maximum that we would use for buying homes. And then, of course, some of the utilities not being provided. And then one of the questions that we did ask both groups was, what would they do if they can't meet the lease up or the affordability period based on their numbers? And we were just concerned that the response was they would just deal with it at the time. And so that was kind of the plus and minuses that we had on the Commonwealth proposal. And then on the Hatch group, we like the townhome styles for all the units that they're experienced in Iowa. They have an on-site sister company that would be managing it. They have a long-term relationship with their general contractor, satisfactory material and layout design. They brought in a specific geothermal partner to the interview. They also scored well. And then their focus was on 50 to 60% of the AMI, and that 100% of the units would be at the 40% rent level over the affordability period. And then all the units would be, and all the utilities would be included in the rent. And when we asked them about the affordability period, they gave a detailed explanation on how they would go about addressing, trying to find, working with area nonprofits, working with the housing authority, working with their lender to make any adjustments they would need to make. Some of the negatives we found was, again, the site plan would need to be revised to include the right number of parking spaces. No really detail on the outdoor amenities, and the requesting of an additional $500,000 of state home funds. But again, they said if they did not get awarded that, they would reduce some of their development costs to make up the $500,000. And so those were kind of the things that we came out about each proposal. We also met with the neighborhood and went over both proposals with them. I think they're here tonight to talk about their feedback to you regarding that as well. And so we're entertaining any questions at this point.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Vanessa, I'll start. So in the single-family residential, this is going to be a mix of market rate and affordable homes. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what's the rationale for having a mix of housing levels?
On the single family side?
Mhm.
Well, again, we talked about that from very beginning, that we didn't want just a concentrate of affordable housing. And HUD allows you to have market rate. They just say you have to have at least 51% at the affordable level. So that's what we've done, so that we would have a mixture of housing types and costs in the subdivision. It's not just a stigma of just all affordable single family homes.
And we talked about this in advance of the meeting, so you were very helpful in walking me through this. And I think there was a strong consensus among council that we valued that having that mix. Could you help the council and the community sort of think through the thought process? We're not going to apply that same philosophy with respect to the apartments, and can you tell us why?
Well, when we talked about doing the multifamily, when the council decided to go ahead and do multifamily, we talked about making it 100% affordable. And that's why we were going after the LIHTC credit, because it allows us to have funds to make those affordable to those income levels. And then that's also a need in our community to provide housing for those income levels that we don't have.
Right. And so one of the things you and Kelly shared with me in advance of today's meeting was that the concerns that we have on perhaps larger apartment complexes, we would not have those same concerns just because the numbers are much smaller. Is that a fair summation of what you shared with me before?
Well,
in terms of best practices, this fits within best practices right now.
I think with both proposals, having on-site management and on-site maintenance helps them to know what's going on at the project at all times.
Okay. And then I think that the line looking at income levels is very difficult. I spent some time trying to figure this piece out. And at the end of the day, I don't feel like we're comparing apples with apples. So could you maybe summarize it this way? Commonwealth is providing 45 units and Hatch is 38. But at the end of the day, how would you describe the impact that we're having on the challenge of affordable housing as a result of both projects?
Well, I think first of all, the impact is that we need it. We need some affordable rental housing. We also need it for those specific families. That's why we also put in the proposal, which both of them would accommodate, is set aside units for Section 8 voucher holders. Because in our community, they can't find affordable rental housing. And the maximum rental housing, income level for IFA is at the 60%. But again, entertaining households at 50 or less and 30 or less is going to help. What we have said all along, our need has been in the community, is that shortage of housing for families.
And I agree with all of that. In fact, I advocated for having a project with over 50 units in our first iteration of this, and I couldn't get consensus from council on that. But when you compare these two projects, again, I feel like I'm looking at apples and oranges. They're just doing this differently. So how would you help us think through the impact if we're trying to have the greatest impact with this project? How do these two proposals compare?
Okay, I think to answer your question, the QAP that IFA put out offered a lot more options to address the needs compared to our RFP. So the RFP and the QAP aren't apples to apples. Again, I think they both tried to blend it together based on, we said we wanted family housing. We said we wanted Section 8 people, households. We also said we wanted it for affordable housing for low-income families. So in that regard, when you look at the QAP and they give you all these options to go at 30% or 40% or rent reduction, it's hard to see how it works together with our RFP. But it's not necessarily the number of units that makes it, it is who they're targeting.
Yep, and that's what I'm trying to tease out. This is exactly what I need help with. So, again,
and we feel the whole committee felt that the whole purpose of us doing this from the beginning, ever since we've been trying to do this project, is to serve the lowest income families that we can for rental housing.
And the Hatch does that better than the Commonwealth, even though Commonwealth has more units.
Right, because they focus on the 50 and 60% income levels, and they are going to keep the rents reduced at the 40%.
Okay.
I mean, that's a great affordability period, because they have committed to a rent reduction option, which we know in this town, you can get in the first year and then you can't afford it the next year. And then you got to start all over trying to find a place that you can afford. But by doing that, the residents have a better option to remain in those places longer. And also the utilities are included in the rent.
Yeah. And as far as some of the other things, I mean, I think both of these developers are very experienced and can build a 40-unit facility. I'm not concerned about that. And I really don't care so much that Hatch has done more in Iowa than the Commonwealth. The people who live there aren't going to care about who built this thing. And when I looked at this, I looked at it from a perspective of a family, because our goal is family. I did note that the Commonwealth actually has a playground, and the Hatch, I don't see in the plans or in the description, there's not a playground for the kids. The Commonwealth has a garden area, which I appreciate. It has a fitness center, which, again, for people who might not be able to afford a fancy gym membership, this is awesome that it would have a community center and a fitness center right there. It also has high-speed internet, which the kids will need. So there's some real pluses to the Commonwealth side that the Hatch doesn't appear to address. They have an electric vehicle charging station. But how many of those people are going to be able to afford an $80,000 electric vehicle? I mean, I think it's aspirational, but I think they'd probably rather have a playground for their kids than an electric vehicle charging station. Those are just some considerations I had. Look forward to other thoughts.
Other questions? Anita, do you have any questions?
I don't. Thank you.
Okay.
Mayor, I have a question for Kelly regarding the parking requirements. So you said, Vanessa, I think that Hatch is at about 1.5 spaces per unit, but that doesn't meet our parking requirements. So when is this proposal due to IFA? And is there time for us to do anything with regard to parking requirements should we want to? I know that Bronwyn has been very enthusiastic about reducing parking requirements in other instances, but I don't know that that's a possibility. And so I'm just wondering, what is the timeline, and is that even an option?
So I think Vanessa responded to me today about this, that I think it's April 19th is the deadline to submit to the state. So if city council gave direction tonight to start, so the way our parking regulations are written, we put into the PUD ordinance that council for affordable housing could drop it from our standard rate of 1 space per bedroom down to just a max of 2 per unit. So to do anything less than 2 per unit would take a whole zoning ordinance text amendment to address that. We can still scope it into the PUD, so it's really just focused where it is already. If you initiate that tonight, we could be back to council for you to adopt an ordinance at the beginning of April. That would then allow time. You might have to waive rules and do readings concurrently to have it done in time for the developer to submit. Our understanding is from the past that IFA expected the city, meaning me, to verify that the concept was essentially compliant with zoning, specifically about parking. So that's why it seems to be pretty important. We have a lot of time to finalize the plan, but I think IFA expects a buildable plan as part of that submittal. And if we initiate it tonight, you could get there before it has to go to the state as a final application.
Kelly, could you ask could you ask the Hatch modify their proposal to add a playground equipment?
Absolutely. I mean, we can, this
They have
is-
designated an area. They just didn't get as specific as Commonwealth. So we can also verify with them what is going to go into their designated area.
So no one on the RFP team kind of like worked through the site to say, how can we make it better? It was more like, will it meet zoning or not? And if not, what generally would have to change? Even just flipping the site to bring the access over to the east side is going to change how this is laid out to some degree.
And I also wanted to share with council, remember, we're putting in $1.8 million of our home dollars. And I just found out the other day that that calculation is going to change the mix of units because, and I'm working with HUD to determine what $1.8 million means in the number of home units that would be on site. And they would have to meet our particular home guidelines, which is at the 60% or less, and how many of those units would actually be managed by us through our home process. But we have been told that there's a percent based on how much money we put in and so forth, that those units have to meet not our requirements as well as IFA requirements. And so trying to put the two together is what I'm working with HUD about, because there's two different kinds of 42 are the IRS code with IFA and our home money, and then maybe possibly other state
But the
home money.
Hatch proposal would meet all those
Right.
already. Yeah.
So there is going to be some additions to the units that would be under our specific home program. I just haven't had a chance to figure out what that looks like yet, but something we have to work on.
Other questions? All right, I'll open up public comment.
I had just,
Oh, go ahead, Anita, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Just a general question. Is there any on-street parking in the area? I was just a general question.
Do you mean along Trip Street?
A long trip, there is none. I don't know that parking regulations are set for Latimer Lane yet.
Okay, thank you.
I think just right, the default is to not have parking on Trip Street because there's nothing there. So Damien, the city's traffic engineer, if there's a request to consider on-street parking, we can have Damien look at that and bring that back as a parking ordinance for the city if that's desirable.
All right, I'll open up public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address council on this item tonight? Please, if you'd state your name and you have it again.
My name is Tony Ramey. I live at 425 Hilltop Road, which is in the the College Creek Old Ames Middle School Neighborhood Association, and that's where the Baker subdivision is also located. So we're about a block away from this, where we live. I was thrilled that the city manager recommended the Hatch proposal for several reasons. One was the 38 versus 45 units. Back when we were doing the 5 with Prairie Fire, that was one of the things that myself and a number of other neighbors were pushing for, in large part because of the lower number of units that I felt contributed to a better balance of quantity and quality. So I like that. The other thing I like is that I see 6 distinct building structures in the hatch design, smaller buildings, as opposed to 3 larger buildings with the Commonwealth design. And I just feel this looks a lot more residential than the Commonwealth design and would blend in a lot better with the neighborhood for that reason. And the other thing I like about this is it limits the whole profile to 2 stories. There's a mix of 1, 2, and 3 story with the Commonwealth. This is all uniform 2 story. I think that is also more in line with the residential nature of what's around it. So, the other thing that's been kind of frustrating about this whole process is just for various reasons, we keep missing the boat on the LIHTC piece and not being able to secure that. And if I understood right, what I read from the city manager's assessment is that even though the scores are both 48, there are some aspects of the hatch proposal that makes it more likely to succeed. And so if we get one that the neighborhood is comfortable with, I'd really like to see it succeed. So I think that's basically it. I just, in my mind, going with that one would be a win-win for the neighborhood and for the city. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Anybody else?
Yeah, Joanne Pfeiffer, 3318 Morningside Street. And I am very pleased, like Tony said, also, we're pretty excited of having the city manager choose Hatch because that's where we're at. And my big thing forever since I've been speaking here has always been on quality of life. And I did truly feel that the Hatch people demonstrated to me higher quality of life. And I'm looking at myself thinking, where would I want to live? Would I want to live in the Hatch building or would I want to live in the Commonwealth building? And I know I would rather live in the Hatch buildings. And also, it all fits with our neighborhood. And I can say the neighbors that I have talked to are pretty excited about having this as their choice. So I want to just thank you all so much for giving us this high. Any other questions?
Thanks, Joanne. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public input. Any closing questions or comments before you entertain a motion?
One of the issues, so I'm really torn on this. My normal posture is to take a very strong posture of deference to city staff particularly on the numbers and who we're trying to help. But I'm concerned with some of the comments. The goal here isn't to make the neighborhood happy, with all due respect. The goal is to meet as many needs as possible. We are under tremendous pressure to infill in the community. And once again, we're allowing neighborhood concerns to be the tail that wags the dog. We have a lot of infill work to do. This is a project where we should be maximizing density on this project. And for me, being able to put 45 units instead of 38, we've invested so many dollars, city dollars, in this, that to minimize the number of units, I think is in the wrong direction. So even though it may not be hitting as much of the affordable target as I would like, it adds 45 units instead of 38. I would add more units if it were up to me. And Joanne asked a very fair question about quality of life. I can tell you where the families with the kids would want to live. They want to live where there's a playground. They want to live where there's a garden. They want to live where there's a fitness center, high-speed internet for the children, for their education. I put my kid, I choose the Commonwealth hands down. So I think those are factors that need to be strong in our consideration and less about concern with the neighborhood input.
Okay.
Tim, I don't know why you think that the neighborhood input is wagging this dog, because we haven't talked about the neighborhood input. We got neighborhood input, and I appreciate that, but that hasn't been something that we discussed tonight with regard to this proposal. Also, if we look at the number of units, 9 of the units from Commonwealth are one-bedroom units. They aren't family units. So 38 family units versus 36 family units says that Hatch is meeting more of the family needs than Commonwealth is. And if I were going to live in one of these places, I think I'd also prefer the place a guaranteed rent reduction over a longer term than a place that has rent reduction maybe for 1 year and then who knows what happens. And so I think that the Hatch proposal, as analyzed for us by staff who have spent a lot of time on this, tells me that that is the one that is meeting more of our RFP requirements and more of our stated goals. Regardless of whether the neighborhood likes it, and I'm happy that they do, I think that this is about the numbers of what is on the table before us. And I am happy with staff's recommendation, and it seems very thorough to me.
Well, the Prairie Fire had the staff recommendation 2 years ago, and we didn't accept that.
I'm past that, Tim. This
Why?
is what's on the table now,
But-
and
Okay,
so
let's go ahead. Is there any, go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah. So the evaluation committee had Commonwealth scoring at 625 and Hatch Development Group at 740. That's a pretty big point difference. And I know we've gone over the pros and cons, but is there anything in particular that stuck out for Commonwealth to rank 120 points different?
One of the things was also looking at the performer
Okay.
and looking at the detail of the performer from the Hatch Development Group that was a lot more defined and clear compared to what we received from the Commonwealth companies.
Gotcha.
Go ahead, Roland.
I would just say I think they're both very nice proposals, right? So it's not like we have an awful choice and a great choice. They're both good choices. I think I trust staff's guidance on what they think would be most secure, looking at any other HUD rules that come along for those dollars, that 1.8 million, and like you were mentioning, and I think the Hatch proposal is good. I do want to touch on the parking thing that Gloria read my mind about. No, I have no problem, as you all know, reducing parking requirements, and so I would like to entertain that thought too, once we get through, what, which one we're going with. I'd like to continue with that parking discussion if we could.
All right. I did need any closing comments before our motions entertained?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's get a motion on the table.
I would move that we proceed with the Hatch proposal.
Second.
That'd be alternative 1 with the conditions contained therein.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any fresh discussion? All right. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Nay.
All right. You want to make any other motions?
Yeah. I would like to move that we direct staff to, how do I say, amend the zoning for PUD affordable housing. Is that
The parking
the parking requirement?
ratio. Okay,
Yeah,
to be able to
could
lower
go down to 1.5 units or spots per unit.
Okay, I do want to note, assuming this motion gets a second and passes, when we
Mhm.
get to item 34 on the agenda tonight, which is the PUD master plan,
Mhm.
we need to not do third reading on that.
Okay.
To allow, because right now it references the affordable housing standard. It wasn't meant to be more restrictive than that. It was meant to just really disclose to people we were doing affordable housing. So if it's possible that that ratio would change, we should not take action on the third reading tonight of the
Okay.
master plan until the parking requirement is resolved.
Sure.
Okay.
Are
So-
you done with your motion?
That was my motion.
Is
Yeah.
there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Move second.
So I
Discussion.
have a concern a little bit. There's no on-street parking. So if we are trying to accommodate families and assuming they have children and they have to work and take their kids to school, some of them are going to have 2 cars. So where would they park?
Well, I'm figuring, so this, I think, is more of a question for us than staff. So you can just look at us on that one.
I can't ask the question to staff about where people would park.
That's not, I mean, that's just as much a question for us.
Well, where would they park? I'll ask you. Where would they
Sure,
park?
thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, my thought process is that not everyone will have a car. And so you might have a family that's got 2, but you also might have some units where a person doesn't have one because maybe they can't afford to have one perhaps. And I'm not saying that, this just, I think the truth of it, with any apartment, we have over parking. And we heard from Grant about the Somerset neighborhood having 100 empty spots. I just don't know that it's needed. I don't know that much parking is needed necessarily. And we could have on-street parking, perhaps. We don't know. I mean,
But
I wouldn't say that we're going to have that, but
I would clarify the way the PUD ordinance works. It's council's discretion to lower it to the stated reduction. It's not a
Wouldn't be
by
every time.
right reduction. It's
Yeah.
up to council. So if a site really can't support the parking reduction, council is not obligated to reduce it. Just to let you, like, generically across the city, if you adopt this ordinance, it's not mandatory that you drop the parking. You get to assess the site conditions and see if it's the correct.
and a person always could
number.
put in more parking than we require. I'm not saying they couldn't put in more if they want to. I'm just saying that we wouldn't require them to have to.
I think it's unfair to compare a project like this with student housing.
I didn't,
Okay.
or I didn't mean to. I didn't intend to do that.
So if we're going to provide for families, I think we should presume that there's going to be a higher need for cars than in apartment complexes that are predominantly students. So I want to think about that as we go forward with planning this parking. There's only so much we can do to incentivize people to walk and bike and take the bus. The reality is our bus system doesn't go necessarily everywhere where these people are going to go work. And so they're going to need cars.
Vanessa, could you, I know you work with a lot of people who are eligible to live in, these type of apartments or have, vouchers. Do you have any kind of a sense in terms of what those who will be, are renters for this might have for vehicles? Or is that it's putting you on the spot, but just trying to get an idea? You might have a good sense of that from your
Well,
research
I
phase.
can just give some experience from the clients that we work with who live in other apartment complex, whether they're affordable housing or not, that yes, there are a number who don't have cars, but then they carpool with those in the complex that do. And then, this particular is not that far from a bus route as well. And then we have other transportation options, whether it's HERDA or things like that can be accessible, even as Uber. So, you kind of have to weigh all of those things that people do find a way to get where they need to get, especially if I babysit for you. If you give me a ride here, they do that kind of neighborhood renter to renter kind of assistance for each other.
Would it be very common for families to have 2 vehicles?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
I'm going to be.
Go ahead, Anita, please.
Thank you. Did I read Hatch's proposal correctly that one of the reasons they were proposing having less parking was based on their experience and they were willing to share data with us? Did I read that correctly?
Can you point us to where you read that?
Yeah.
Was
I
that
will look real quick, thank you.
okay? We'll come back to you, Anita. Rachel, do you have something on?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'll be supportive of this. The reduction from 2 parking spaces per unit to 1.5 is only 19 spaces. And the likelihood that every family in one of those units has 2 cars, I think, is low. So I think this is a really reasonable thing for us to do to have more open space on the site as well, rather than making some of that into parking.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's my goal, is to maximize the amount of space we can use for housing and open space, and cars are my last priority.
Any luck, Anita?
It was in the pro forma. I am going back to that. I mean, in their proposal to us, and I haven't located that yet.
Okay. Well, we're going to take your word for it. I'm sure that
Okay.
they can.
Sorry,
I'm sure.
I remembered noting that they said that they had data to support it, that they would share with us if we wanted to request that. So I will try to locate that, but yes, I thought that was in the proposal.
I'm sure they probably would if they do have it too. So. All right. Any further discussion? Do you understand the motion? Those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried. Is there anything relative to expressing interest in the high-speed internet or the playground equipment, or anything in terms of asking staff to discuss that with the developer?
Regarding the high-speed internet, it is a requirement in the RFP. It's a requirement of HUD that they have to provide broadband to the apartments.
Okay, good.
That's part of our RFP.
And do you know, is that part of the utility cost that they're providing? They're actually paying for that too, or you don't know on that one?
That I don't know.
Okay, all right. Did you say something else, Bronwyn?
Yeah, I was going to move that we ask staff to inquire about the playground and the amenity space on the Hatch proposal when working out the final plan with them.
We can do that.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Anything else?
No.
All right.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 20. Staff report regarding landscape accents within building setback.
All right, sorry, I'm trying to close a few windows here. Hold on a second. All right, so tonight we have a staff report as a referral from City Council to discuss allowances essentially for features that don't need to meet setbacks. Originally, the question came about in terms of what are fence requirements in front and side yards. And then we have an exception section where we allow certain things on a specified list to be allowed in setbacks, specifically in front yard setbacks. They're only allowed if they're like a fence to be the same heights of fences. So tonight, what we're focused on is the projection into setback section. There's a couple of related standards in there related to planter boxes. I listed fences in there again, just for reference, as well as this landscape accent feature. The landscape accent feature was something that a few years back we tried to broaden, make more usable, where we added that an arbor used to be 10 square feet. We made it up to 15 square feet, meaning that arched covering could cover no more than 15 square feet. There's no height limit on an arbor. There's some other features in there that are really geared towards that 4-foot height limit of a front yard fence. And then we added a section that said other landscape features of a similar nature and type, provided that they're effectively not a fence. So there was a lot of judgment in that last section about when does it become a fence. The Zoning Board of Adjustment had 2 appeal cases this fall for 2 different properties, looking at what really is like a fence. What does that mean in terms of how large it is, how big it is, how tall it is? And in both cases, they decided that staff had judged it correctly, that the objects were fences, meaning in the front yard case that the the enclosure that was described or appealed was too tall. It was over 4 feet tall. And then the other one was in a rear yard where people had attached posts that were over 12 feet tall to a fence. And we said, if it's attached to a fence, that's a fence. You can't say it's not. And the ZBA agreed with that and saying, yeah, you can't have 12-foot poles on a fence and claim that it's a landscape accent that's not part of a fence. So with that, that's pretty good indication that there's some struggle for staff at administering the section. You've had appeals by homeowners about how these things work. So staff would really like to clarify this section for projections. And we need some direction from council that if you want to address this, where are you trying to take this standard? Are you trying to be more limited than the flexibility we already granted to people? Are we really just trying to define the envelope of what's allowed? Or possibly even more permissive than we are currently? And then a corollary to that is we have no permitting process for our fences in the city. So we have fence regulations. We have different types of requirements for where structures can go on a property. But if you're not truly building a building, you don't need a building permit for a fence or a zoning permit for a fence. So we're asking, much like the driveway conversation we're going to have a little bit later, that when we have a bunch of regulations that are open to interpretation, it's probably better to require a permit than not. Because after the fact, there's quite of an expense by a homeowner if they find out they did it incorrectly. So we're asking, independent of whatever rules we may change or look to change tonight, that you also institute a permit process. Arguably, if it's a very clear black and white standard, maybe a permit's not necessary, but I still think the fence permit process would be beneficial. I know people complain about getting permits, but it does ensure that someone does something correctly and is not avoiding compliance or told they don't need to do something because someone just doesn't understand there's regulations, even if there's no permit.
How do they know that there's a permit required? Like, say, for example, say we haven't had one for fences this whole time, and then we're like, okay, we're going to have one. And then how do people know that we just have to, it's luck
So
that they're
it's
going to
just
call
like,
and ask?
how do you not know you don't need one now? It's incumbent upon you as a property owner to ask what regulations apply. You have access to our municipal code. I understand that's kind of Byzantine to go through. So what we would do if we institute a fence permit, we would reach out to fence contractors to the extent that we can and say, hey, I know you haven't been doing this for a while, but this is expected now from the city. So we have had to do that with the driveway permits. Some people, we had to work through that for the last 6 months. People were ignoring the fact that they were supposed to get permission, weren't consistently getting permission. So we've been working on that for 6 months to build up a knowledge base. So it's not going to happen overnight. Admittedly, we'll see how this summer goes for driveways after people have had experience from last summer.
Sure.
So it would definitely be a process to get awareness built. For the most part, I mean, we can put it in a newsletter that's going to hit a select few, but hitting the contractors is probably the best way to do it when we are aware of contractors that would do fencing.
Sure. Makes sense. Yeah. Thank you.
So we do have some examples if you want to go through kind of how garden features, arbors, fences, all of those things, trellises, how do they work? Or we can kind of walk through the options and I can answer questions of what the council's interested in regarding these things. So I did share with you some visual examples earlier this afternoon. They're the same things that I can put up for tonight. So I guess I'm looking, is there questions or do you want me to go through examples specifically?
Do you think clarification options? Are you ready to?
I think might be, if you, since no, it wasn't in the packet, Kelly, if you can
Sure.
just pull them up real quick so people can see what you're talking about.
Yep.
in case there's anything.
So I put a collection together of about 10 features that are mostly found in Ames. A couple other examples are there too, just to provide some context because I don't know everything that's in the city. But I do want to come back to this diagram. We use this in the front yard parking too. So this diagram is illustrating what we consider a front yard, which is the hatching. The red line is what would be that minimum setback. So we have two sets of standards. Fences anywhere in a front yard are restricted in height to that 4 feet, essentially. There's some caveats there. In terms of other types of structures, buildings per se, you're just looking at that 25-foot setback as your standard. So if you see that middle example where the house is set back further than the 25 feet, you could do other things closer to that 25-foot line, but you could never have a fence that's greater than 4 feet, even if it was 30, 35, 50, 80 feet back from the street. So that's why I wanted to make sure I showed this, because I don't think that's always understood, that we consider yards different than setbacks. Yards are bigger than setbacks. Setbacks are a subset of a yard. So just keep that in mind as you think about some of these things. So we'll start with what I think everybody would assume is something that's permitted by that arbor language we have. So an arbor, and we also found out during the appeal process, people use a lot of different words for things that aren't defined in the zoning ordinance. Talk about trellises, we talk about arbors. You can find a lot of different pictures about what those things mean. So in this case, staff would have considered this elevated arch over a gate to be equal to an arbor, because an arbor doesn't have to have any specific purpose. The fence is 4 feet tall. That arbor would be allowed. So everything in this picture would be compliant with our current fence and landscape accent requirements. There's even some garden fencing further back also behind that that's 4 feet in height as well. So this would be the perfect example of what our code wants to allow. So then you jump into a planter box, which we allow planter boxes, again, up to 4 feet in height. And this is where it gets a little less clear. As you start to fence these boxes, are they truly fences enclosing something? Are they an ancillary piece of the planter box? The way I would have to look at this, the way this is written, a planter box is still limited to 4 feet in height. So if there's any permanent attachments to that planter box, whether it's a fence or not, it's kind of irrelevant. 4 feet's your cap. So in this case, I would say those things are probably not compliant with the zoning ordinance because they're all over 4 feet in height.
How permanent is permanent?
Good question.
Because you could rip those out every winter.
So I didn't go on site and investigate exactly what this is, but there is, and you'll see this in one of the following pictures, I would made a different determination that because of the way it's affixed to the ground, it probably is not permanent. This may or may not be. I don't have enough detail to tell you that exact thing. But if that's a wooden stake that's attached to the planter box, I'd be hard pressed to say that that's not a permanent component to
If
the
it's just driven into
planter
the
box.
soil, it's all right.
But if it's attached to the planter box, again,
Sure.
if you attach it to a fence,
Interesting.
it's part of the fence, no matter what you try to tell
Okay.
me, right? So at some point, we have to use objective observations over intent.
Mm-hmm.
And
Uh,
if, Kelly, if that were a fence, it would not be allowed?
If it was a wood fence that's over 4 feet tall, not allowed. That's based on that interpretation that a fence is either a barrier or encloses space. So there's a discussion point here. If I just have a single 6-foot panel that is 8 feet tall, is that a fence? Probably not, because you haven't really made a barrier and nor have you enclosed anything. But when you put a series of those together, that's what the ZBA decided was to be treated as a fence. And that's one reason why we want to address this is when does it become a fence?
And the transparency or opacity of the thing does not matter.
That
which
is not part of our fence
we
rules.
talked about. But I think that's interesting because these it's like visually you can barely see it, at least in the image. I mean, maybe in person it's a bit more, but like if you're using something very fine, like a mesh kind of gardening thing, it's not nearly as visible as like a wooden fence.
Yep. All right, so I'm going to jump to the next one. So here's what I got to jump over one. So this is one of the features that was appealed to the ZBA. So this was clearly over 4 feet. It enclosed a space. Basically, the ZBA agreed with staff that because of its length and its nature of what it was designed to do, it met the intent and the definition of a fence. So at this point, this is too tall. It's not that it's too big. It's too tall. Is really what the issue is, because if it's 4 feet tall, it's allowed in the front yard. At 6-ish plus feet, it's not allowed in the front yard.
So what is our justification for only having fences of 4 feet in the front yard?
So the 4 feet fits our basic clearance requirement from a site visibility standpoint. So if you were on an intersection or at a driveway, we want features to be less than 4 feet tall so that you have a line of sight. So I think in my I wasn't here when we picked 4 feet, but I would say 4 feet's not an uncommon number in zoning ordinances. And I think it really comes down to wanting uniformity of having a line of sight across the site in the front yard. It's very hard every time you try to parcel out the regulations to deal with little idiosyncrasies on a site. You get harder and harder for consistency and performance. So most ordinances are just going to say uniformly one number is allowed for a fence until you transition to a side or rear yard. So the 4, I believe, is based on site visibility or line of sight.
It's just interesting that it doesn't matter if it's transparent. I mean,
But it is, so like a chain link fence is not actually transparent when you get an angle on it. So it's not as easy just to say it's transparent. It's transparent from a 90-degree perpendicular viewpoint, but when you get to a side, a chain link fence is not transparent when you're trying to look through it. So I've had that issue before in the past too. Just to be clear, chain link fences are not transparent. It depends on your view. I had to look at this one for a long time. I decided that probably everything in this would be found to be allowed under the current zoning ordinance. Now, again, I haven't been on site. No one's complained. I haven't had to look at that in great detail and make a decision that somebody had to had to live with. So planter box is allowed. The garden table is under 4 feet. The cistern or the rain barrel is not a structure because it's just a barrel. We don't regulate that. And then those wire hoops or whatever those things are, those are probably not permanently affixed to the ground. They're kind of leaning towards those garden stakes, and they're not what I would say really affixed in the ground with like a footing or any kind of like permanency to them. That's probably arguable, but it's probably as far as we could go without saying that is truly a permanent affixed structure. So with those understandings of what those things are, and maybe they're even under 15 square feet. If they're under 15 square feet, it doesn't even matter if they're permanent or not. So this is probably about as far as the zoning ordinance would go in allowing for features to be in a front yard within a setback.
So I'm trying to understand why that rain barrel, which seems really massive to me, is not a structure.
They didn't build it.
It's not constructed.
Well,
You could
isn't-
get the
I mean,
biggest
if
rock
if
you
have it on-
want and
but if
plop
you
it
have
down in
sitting
your
on a
yard.
Platform.
So the platform is under 4 feet.
Okay,
So
so if the
it-
platform were over 4 feet.
Then the platform would be a structure.
Okay.
And it'd be limited. But if you had a barrel that's over
If you
4
just got a
feet
bigger
tall-
rock and you brought it,
So yeah, but let's just focus like on a barrel. You could have a 4-foot barrel, a 5-foot tall barrel.
10-foot tall barrel.
We're not saying that's a structure, even if it's on the ground or it's elevated. So the podium or the platform might be regulated, but the barrel itself is not considered a structure. Now, if you built it into a structure, yes, I'm going to have to consider that a structure. But if you're just placing it on the property, no one in the building inspections division or planning would say a barrel has a setback requirement.
So a barrel like that could be sitting on a corner property obscuring the view, and we wouldn't be able to do anything because it's not a structure.
So you still, the street intersection is slightly different. We don't allow any obstruction, vegetative or structural, in the actual site vision triangle. It's the only time that we regulate vegetation and other things is it's worded to say it must be clear at all times between 4 and above 4 feet. So that would be different at an intersection of a street.
So rain barrel somehow fits with vegetation or
No,
structure?
it's not written to be.
Oh, it's just
it's
any-
not written to prohibit only structures in the site vision triangle. It prohibits everything
Okay.
that is more than 4 feet in height, whether it's vegetation or not, is what I was trying to point out.
Okay, because I know that's not vegetation.
Correct. So another couple examples. Here's another one that depends on what you call it. You could get people to call us a couple of different things. It probably doesn't meet any of our allowances. It's either too tall or too big in terms of square footage. So if it was considered a pergola, it would have to be moved 3 feet away from the property line. If it was a fence, it needs to come down to 6 feet. Or reduced in size again to be an arbor. This is larger than what that 15 square feet would be. So here's an example of something that wouldn't meet code that we currently have.
Why couldn't you call it an arbor?
It's too big. It's over 15 square feet.
Ah.
So you can make it smaller and it'd be okay. But as depicted in this picture, it wouldn't meet any specific standard that we have to be exempt from setbacks.
And that could go anywhere in a backyard.
Yeah, so this
Except-
isn't even a front yard picture. This is on a side or a rear yard. So remember, these projections are allowed in all setbacks of the site. It's just the front yard seems to be more dramatic than these other locations. So the next one is really kind of the perfect example of option 3 that's described here. So this is an installation where someone installed trellises, a series of 3 of them. I haven't measured them, but I believe they're all under 8 feet in length. And I think they're about 6 feet tall in this picture. So if you picked option 3 described tonight, this would be a very good representation of 3 allowances in your yard as a garden accent. So you could argue, is this allowed now under the code? I'm not sure, because I don't know at what extent you become a fence, how much space between each one would make it not a fence. It's probably arguable whether it's allowed or not today, but under option 3, this would clearly be permitted as the 3 objects that are less than 8 feet in length. Any questions on this one? Okay. So here's another trellis version that probably isn't going to ever be compliant. It's likely greater than, well, as a structure, it's clearly greater than 8 feet in width. It's taller than 6 feet. There's a number of reasons why, as currently configured, this wouldn't meet any of our exceptions for setbacks. So you'd either have to move it in or reduce it in size or height to allow for this kind of thing to exist. And it's a little confusing because there is like another like play structure in front of the trellis. So there's a little bit extra woodwork in there, but it's just an example of something that's bigger than what's allowed.
So
And that's in a
just-
side yard.
Just to be clear, we're talking about inside of setbacks. Is that correct?
Yes. So essentially on property lines rather
So
than
the point is that
setback.
someone could build this in their backyard, in their side yard, as long as they're not within the setbacks. Is that
Correct. Yep. So
So
once
this-
you're 6 feet in from your side property line or 20 feet in from your rear yard, you can do whatever you like with a structure. It's just up to these property lines is really what we're talking about.
But just for clear, whoever's maybe watching or in the audience, not saying this is in violation. It's just something like this. If it was within,
If it's on the think of it as being in this case, on the property line, it would be exceeding expectations for height and size.
we are not trying to control what you can do on your property. It's just basically right adjacent to the property line, within the setback. Thank you.
Was that example? Do you happen to know?
Where is it?
No, yeah. Would it be compliant or not? Is it within
I
the
think it's
setback?
too tall to be a fence from what I can observe about it.
But I mean, it would be allowed, you said, if it could clear the setback, right? If you could.
Yes, if you moved it in 6 feet and it's not in the side setback,
right,
you can be 8, 12, 14, 17. You can be 17 feet tall before you have a additional setback of.
Yeah, but no, but I just mean like, is this example, it is in violation, this particular.
I think it's too tall. I believe it's over 6 feet tall. So a fence can't be more than 6 feet on a property line. That's the standard that would apply.
Last one.
So here's another front yard example where someone has attached this kind of a trellis type structure to their fence. Again, once you're part of a fence, I have to treat you as a fence unless there's some other exception for that. So in this case, this would be taller than allowed as a fence, even though it has a trellis pattern to it. So in this case, this would be something that we couldn't permit because of our fence rules. And what I proposed as option 3 would not allow for this either because it's connected to a fence. Again, there's no exceptions to fences here. It's whether you're standalone objects in the front yard rather than a fence. So those are the examples I sent you. I'm happy to take feedback, give direction. So tonight as a staff report, I'm looking for direction if there's any on how to proceed towards drafting a text amendment.
This is a hard one for me because I have seen so many examples of things I like that would not be allowed. Like, so I like that. I like the one before it. I like the one before that. And so I'm really having a hard time, like, how could I tell people that that's inappropriate? I mean, because I get the why on controlling fences in terms of lines of sight and you don't want to block everything off. But this, while it is taller than a fence, is see-through. And so like, I get what you're saying too. I mean, I'm not saying that's not true. You attach it to a fence, it's a fence, but yeah, it doesn't seem to meet the logic of why we prohibit fences because it's see-through.
So Bronwyn, are you then, if you were looking at these options, are you saying that option 4, which allows that kind of arbor or trellis as part of the fence, but taller, which I think this is what this illustrates, right, Kelly? Option 4 as a sort of?
I think it would be more these, this would be clearly option 4. If there was a question about what was allowed, this is clearly higher than 6 or 8 feet tall, right? So option 4 would clearly allow this if you did nothing else.
So is that the kind of thing that you were
I thought that one was
thinking of?
already allowed under our current system.
I would say it is.
So
I think kind of just want to point out what depends on what the outcome of this discussion is. I mean, it is attached to a fence. So if it's attached to the fence, should I be calling it part of the fence? Probably, but I've said it's an arbor. The arbor should be freestanding, actually. So maybe you've just talked me into that I'm wrong on this one.
I know this is why it's hard, right? It's because yes, this one I should be allowed.
So I actually used the similar feature language instead of saying it's truly a standalone arbor to say it was okay.
Yeah.
But I would prefer clarity versus interpretation on this.
Yeah. I'm just okay allowing a lot of stuff, so it's hard for me. Someone else who's more restrictive should go.
Yeah, I feel like we're like really overcomplicating this, and it's with Bronwyn.
Well, how do you feel about staff's recommendation that we implement option 5 as a part of any decision that we might make, which is the permitting, so that people know what they're putting up?
I just find it difficult for people to know if there's a permit to do it. I think people are going to do it anyways and then probably have to rip it out if.
So that's already the situation, right? We already have the rules.
Yeah.
And people are ignoring them and no one's asking. And it's the same thing as the driveways. We had rules, no one got a permit. And then you're stuck with, what do I do with 452 properties that are in non-compliance?
Mm-hmm.
And there's no obvious answer of saying, well, your contractor didn't do what they were supposed to do and get a permit, or you didn't get the permit. So I think there's an education curve, but I guess as a staff member, I don't think saying how are people going to know that there's a rule is a reason not to have a rule if it's valuable to have the rule in the first place. There's a lot of rules in the city you need to learn about or be accustomed to as a property owner.
Is it common for a city to require a permit for a fence?
I don't think it's uncommon where I've worked in the past, not in Iowa. Yes, they all 3 required fence permits. I believe Ankeny requires fence permits. I have not surveyed other cities to tell you who does. It's not uncommon because generally you're trying to avoid compliance and code enforcement problems on the back end.
Okay, we've spent quite a bit of time on this tonight. Can we get some direction to, do you want to continue this? I mean, this is, again, this was referred to staff as a request. They're not bringing it to us because they want to make some changes. Is there interest in pursuing this further and getting a text amendment, implementing a permit? Take this under advisement and just move on and not taking action tonight?
Well, option 3, was it? Sorry. Is more permissive than we have now?
I think it is slightly more permissive and definitely brackets what's allowable instead of interpreting when is it a fence, right? That's really the question of when does a landscape accent, which is a series of features, turn into a fence where it needs to be 4 feet tall or 6 feet tall. So this, in some ways, it's more permissive, but it definitely defines the boundaries of what's permissive.
I mean, I guess as long as we're moving in a more permissive direction, I'm okay with that.
So is there a motion?
Move option 3.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. I'll take that as a positive, Anita. A little lag there.
I want to move option 5 as well, just in case anyone's interested in that.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
'Cause
Discussion?
I feel like staff are asking us for this and I trust them. So
I think that what appeals to me about it is that this is, as staff said, it would be beneficial for establishing a clear process to communicate to the public. And I think communication is important. And if we can get that process underway, maybe we'll have fewer problems in the future.
Okay. Any comments, Anita, on this one?
No, I'm fine with that one. Thank you.
Okay.
Would there be any sort of cost for the permit?
I don't expect that there needs to be. I think that would be something we'd talk about when we got back to this. The idea of, are we doing a permit? Are we doing an inspection? Is there a cost? If it was a cost, it'd be very minor. I would not be looking for a substantial fee in association with that.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so Tim, Amber, Rachel. Anita, were you an aye or a nay?
I was a nay.
Okay, motion failed. All right, anything else?
So I'm going to be clear. So drafting a text amendment based on option 3 is the only direction.
Correct.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Kelly. We'll move on to item number 21, staff report regarding setbacks for vehicle charging stations.
Yep. So we're not even close to done with me. So thanks for saying.
All right.
You're not even close to done with me, but thanks for saying things.
Well, we can.
We'll thank
suggest
you
that.
after
You can
each
dream.
one.
I know. So tonight, this is a self-initiated referral request by staff and Ames Electric. We've been working with Tesla trying to locate a fast charging station. They're not the only people that have been trying to look into charging options for the city. So what we're asking for, a second here, is right now the way our standards are written. We just went through this in the last section. You're only allowed to be in setbacks if the code says you can be in setbacks, whether it's equipment, structures, parking, things of all types of that nature. So what we're seeing is when people want to retrofit a site that was built with no expectations of having electric charger stations in the parking lot, they aren't going to fit on many sites in Ames. That's because we have a 20-foot front yard setback requirement. We allow parking. Now we allow parking to encroach 10 feet into that. Our older code allowed parking lots to go within 5 feet of sidewalks. So that's a pretty tight space. So this equipment picture I showed in this memo is from Altoona, and it's from a few years ago. But it gives you a sense that if you're going to have 8 fast charging stations, the amount of electrical equipment that's necessary to support it. This is a lot different than the level 2 charger that's in our back parking lot or the one that we had installed out at West Hy-Vee. Those are more of like a 4 foot tall post. There's no transformer directly associated with that. There's no extra cabinet necessarily with that. Those are pretty minor encroachments. This is substantially different because they need a whole transformer just to power the fast charging stations. So there are logistics issues. Tesla has talked about this with us about how the relationship of all the equipment works. It's definitely cheaper to group it. They can disassociate it at a higher cost, but really it comes back to what, if any, features are we interested in allowing to encroach into a setback. Staff is saying if we want to allow for chargers in parking lots that are already in setbacks, I think we should create that option for a charger to be in a parking lot that's in a setback. I think what we really described is maybe even some encroachment into a landscaped front yard would be okay. We're saying that at least if there's at least 10 feet of landscaped front yard, then some encroachment would be permissible. So whether it's in the paved parking space or in a landscaped component, I think staff would say that's a reasonable compromise. Here's an example where there's no setback. This would be like that worst case scenario where the parking lot's 5 feet from a setback. I do have 2 other pictures. Tesla did send Representative Tesla. I'm not personally communicating with Tesla. A representative from Tesla did send examples of some more newer stations. So they did say that the Altoona one is a slightly older product. This is how they would look at it now with having one cabinet with the 4 stations. And I talked about this in the report. They buy these as modules. So if you buy one, you're getting 4. You're not installing just one fast charger. So they want to do these in groups of 4. So 4, 8, 12. They want to do 8 typically in their installations. So you can see the transformer is not in this picture, but there is that one large cabinet that goes with it. Here's an example from another one, more close-up view. You can get a sense of the scale of what we're seeing here. You can see behind here where that landscape separation then is. In this case, they do have a transformer right next to that. I don't administer the sign code, but this is a good picture. Talking with inspections, you might need to look at an exception in the sign code in case, again, you're going on to a site that already used their whole sign allowance up. How do you permit the signage that goes with these branded chargers or whatever? So, when a developer built something 20 years ago, I'm using it all up. It's not available for anybody else. We might need to make some kind of an exception in the code for fueling stations, whether they're gas pumps or vehicle chargers, whatever. So that's a secondary issue, but this is a good example of that. So I think this gives you a good sense of what we're talking about for equipment. Staff wants to be supportive of some version of this. And I think we're just looking for direction of how council wants to look at doing an exception for this.
Questions? You're recommending or suggesting option 2 as being a good compromise. Kelly?
Yeah.
What is staff recommending? Yeah, option 2.
So if we move forward with option 2, how does that affect the landscape ordinance? Or does it? Does it create additional challenges for businesses who are trying to meet landscaping requirements?
So with requiring there to be still at least 10 feet, all required landscaping should be able to fit in that 10 feet.
But if the layout of a site is particularly unique or awkward, is there going to be potential issues? Or no?
The hardest thing for them to do is, so the way I'm seeing, let's just use this picture as the example. The chargers themselves will require no screening. That's not expected. That cabinet's a great question, whether it should be screened. The transformer does require screening. So the transformer is the tricky part. Once we require the landscaping to screen something, that's the tricky part, to fit the transformer on the site where electric can use it, where it's accessible, and then still meet the screening requirement. You can do it without landscaping. You can do it on a commercial site with an enclosure if you wanted to. But your standard landscaping shouldn't conflict with this. I'm not conceptualizing that being the problem for option 2, which is not allowing transformers in that front setback. Option 2 is allowing the white parts of this in the setback. The chargers for sure, and I think Tesla's asking if that one white cabinet can be allowed to have some element of encroachment as well. And we can define that as well. But the transformer is not part of option 2.
So the transformer would have to be on their property.
It would need to be outside of the setback.
Outside of the
So
setback.
we require that now across the city, that a transformer can't be in a setback, in the front setback, I'm sorry.
Does a transformer have its own setbacks from things like the edge of a parking lot or a parking lot, or?
It has, so for us, we just say it can't be in a front setback. Ames Electric, there's some spacing requirements around it for heat dissipation, as well as they need to have access from a vehicle on one side of it. So that it always ends up next to a paved area to meet Ames Electric access requirements.
Sure.
And then they deal with the screening requirements after that.
Okay.
And if they set it internal to the site, then there's not screening.
Sure.
Just like we said, if you set these chargers internal to the site, none of this matters. It's that they're just trying to put them in high profile locations or having the cheapest installation costs.
Is there any further questions? Otherwise, entertain a motion on an option.
Move option 2.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Any questions, Anita?
No, thank you.
All right. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
I was also thinking about sites that don't have space in their setback. So if they don't even have the 20 feet to deal with. And my thought was maybe we could say that if a site can't do that, and if they basically if they're already at their
I think
their
what you were
maximum required
yeah, what
parking.
we were talking about is, can you displace a parking space
Yes.
to put in the charging equipment? We count
Yeah.
the spaces with chargers obviously as required parking,
spaces.
but if you had to lose a
The
space
boxes, the white
to put a
boxes.
cabinet in,
Yeah.
would that be permissible?
Right. And
So I would need some kind of allowance to drop below minimum parking by one. I mean, we're talking about one or
One
two
spot.
spaces is all. We're not talking about a big drop.
right.
Um,
So I was hoping to pursue that too. Yeah, I would move that that we direct staff to prepare that as well. 2 spots
Can
to
you,
drop.
what does that mean?
Yeah. Okay. So I would move
Jeremy's
that.
trying to take this motion down.
Yeah. That we direct staff to, allow sites to reduce their.
I think the way we talked about it is if you could not provide the charging equipment and transformer outside of the parking lot, you would be allowed to remove up to 2 parking spaces to place charging equipment in the transformer.
Yes.
Got that, Jeremy?
Second.
All right.
Thanks, Kelly.
No problem.
All right. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
All right. Anything else?
Not with this. Move on.
All right, move on to item 21, discussion on additional questions for resident satisfaction survey, and then council after this. We'll take a short break.
Okay, I promise to be shorter than Kelly. As I come to you every year about this time, I'm asking you for some input on our annual resident satisfaction survey. The last couple of years, you have made quite a few changes, adding and subtracting questions. As you all know, the survey is 12 pages long, so it's rather lengthy. And to add questions typically means you need to subtract. And of course, the survey doesn't have to be altered. You can leave it exactly the way it is. So this is really just an opportunity to perhaps capture something timely or remove something. I think you did a lot of cleanup last time, which was really nice. You consolidated a couple of questions, updated some of the topics, and it's perfectly fine to say, yep, we're good with how it looks now, or this is your opportunity to add a few things.
Questions?
So this isn't, well, I guess it is a question, maybe. The last bullet item on here is regarding the question about what could the city do to demonstrate its commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I don't remember how that question was received by residents, whether they understood what was meant by diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so it occurred to me that perhaps we should modify that question so that it actually maybe has an echo of what was there before, which is that sense of belonging. So what could the city do to demonstrate its commitment to
I'm sorry,
ensuring?
what page are you on?
Oh, I'm just looking at the cover sheet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the survey.
It's
No.
on page 11 on the survey.
Okay. So what could the city do to demonstrate its commitment to ensuring that all residents feel they belong? Just to combine the previous question and clear up any confusion about DEI.
Is there any objection to that? Is that clear?
There was a lot of discussion that went on that I reviewed from last year when you asked the question. I did not review the responses, so I'm not as clear on where you think you could find some different, maybe some particular wording that you think would be providing more direction?
Well, I just read it. What could the city do to demonstrate its commitment to ensuring that all residents feel they belong?
Oh, okay.
So
Just to
striking-
bring in the sense of belonging as
So
opposed.
striking diversity, equity, and inclusion and using the same first part of the sentence and just changing the last few words.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yes, except that it's not, yeah, I guess so. There's a nuance of difference there. It's about whether people feel they belong as opposed to our commitment to creating a place where people belong. So
I'm just trying to capture or trying to see if we can get this question, your suggested question, in a form of a motion, essentially.
well, do you want me to make it as okay, I move that we change question 11, or is that on page 11?
It's on page 11.
What's the question number?
E.
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 E?
Mhm.
I move that we change the wording of question E to what could the city do to demonstrate its commitment to ensuring that all residents feel they belong?
I'll second.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Anything else, Gloria?
Nope.
Anita, any questions or comments?
That was actually the same one I was thinking about. Even though I do recall that conversation, I think that change is a good one.
Okay. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I didn't have any new questions to add. I did wonder, will we be offering again that if people want to, I think I only heard that there was one taker maybe last year, but I would still like for us to promote that this can be available in other languages if they would like to take the survey.
Yeah, I thought that was an excellent change, and I don't see any reason we couldn't have it exactly the same way this year.
So I had an idea to maybe add a question on page 9 where we're asking about what garbage products you'd be willing to sort, what's your preferred method of disposal. I think it might be good to add a question in there about our potential for going to an organized waste collection system and get some feedback on that. But I'm wondering if the timeline on this survey is going to be after when that issue gets brought back to council. So do you have any idea on that?
Well, I think we're going to be completing our discussions with the haulers in the next few weeks. And then are we going to be prepared to come back to the council then, Brian? Or can we wait until after the survey results come in, but we don't really report. until
September.
next-
I come back in September, October.
Yeah, depending on the direction the city council goes, there might be some legal issues that we need to explore relating to the different models, especially those that we don't have a good example of another community in Iowa following. We want to make sure we'd be on firm legal ground to implement something like that if that's the direction the council wants to go. So that might take some time.
I think we move quicker than September, maybe, or not.
I would think we'd be right around then, perhaps.
Like,
Would
not a
anyone-
rush.
Yeah, would anyone else be interested in that sort of a question?
We'll have to define what that means. The term organized,
Yeah.
or is it defined already? It's not defined in there, is there?
Is there
have to-
interest? You can make a motion and see if there's interest or not.
I don't exactly know how to phrase the
Okay.
question, so.
Okay.
should-
Well, you want to, the motion is be as an added question that would be to the essence.
gain
Yeah,
feedback
versus
from-
giving, the reason I asked for Gloria is I had heard she'd actually rewritten the question. If you want to just ask, because I have a couple of these I want to bring up to council for consideration too, that I don't have questions written, but I want to get
Okay.
some feedback. So,
I would move that we add a question asking for input on organized waste collection.
is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Anything else?
I was thinking about a question about people's tolerance or interest in, how to phrase it, not fare free is not the preferred lingo, prepaid fare. So Cyride being essentially fare free, right? But asking people's interest in that and then sort of like tolerance to pay more for that. So again, I don't know how to phrase it exactly either, but something like the city would like, or is, not would like to, but one thing we think about sometimes is providing Cyride fare free to any citizen. To do so might cost you more in property taxes. Would you be willing to pay, $10 more a year, 20, with some sort of range of cost increase that we might suggest?
Susan, is there any problem with asking that kind of question, given that about 50% of our respondents are students who are not likely to be paying property taxes? Can you say if you
students
pay
already
property
have
taxes,
fare
answer
free
this?
Cyride too. So maybe, I don't know if we've had questions like this, but it could be maybe we ask only residents, non-student residents specifically to respond to that question.
You could have the first
Or
question
just filter it out.
be like, if we made Cyride fare free, would you be interested in using it? And one box would be, I'm an Iowa State student, it's already fare free. Then it
Yeah,
kind
and
of
then you can
filtered them
sort that
out.
out,
So
That's a good way of doing it. I mean, I'm sure the survey drafters could figure that one
Yeah.
out. But that's a good way of thinking about it.
But
Let's sort that out.
people who rent pay property taxes.
Yeah.
Well, they're paying rent.
They don't
They pay,
know
they pay property
do.
taxes. It's just built into the
Right,
rent.
but I don't know how many people are aware that they're paying property taxes in their rent. I mean, I'm not saying it's that property taxes don't have an impact on student rent. I just don't know that many students who think of it that way.
Okay,
So-
was that a motion? That was a motion, right?
Yeah.
You have a second?
second.
All right, go ahead. Any further discussion on this one? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppo- Opposed? Anything else? So I had a couple.
One more, too.
Well, I just had some, when I asked the question of council is, given the fact that we're considering this climate action plan, I'm wondering if, similar to what Brown was talking about, is trying to test the waters and see if people are willing to pay increased property taxes. So Rachel, what you were saying, you have to first of all say, I'm an Iowa State student. I get what Tim's saying. I don't pay property tax. I'm trying to drill down to the people that are paying property taxes. But, would you be willing to pay for increased property taxes for the next 20 to 30 years to support climate action initiatives for carbon reduction? Would you be willing to pay for increased electric rates, garbage rates? And if not willing to pay for increases, how should the initiatives be paid for? I think to tease this out, to try and get survey respondents, it's going to be, essentially we got an opportunity to get 600 or 700 people to get feedback on the survey. And then the other question would be is, are you planning on purchasing an electric vehicle? And if so, would it be in a 3 to 5 year, 10 years, or never?
I like that question better than just, are you willing to pay more for climate initiatives? Because that doesn't get at a range of how much they'll need to pay, because we don't know that yet either exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think, people are definitely scared of the cost of it, but we don't have a range that we could ask them, like maybe, or maybe we could. I guess I'd want to see it in ranges rather than just, are you willing to pay more?
Didn't we have ranges in the consultant survey that we could maybe use?
I think we're still waiting. I think it's in April. Of
No, we gave.
No, yeah, we might have had one.
We
in
try
there.
Yeah.
to estimate it, but it's kind of like the same Cyride. You're always gonna have to come up with some ranges and see
what
you'll
their
design
tolerance
a program
is, yeah.
around what they're willing to do, right?
Mhm.
I don't know what the right ranges are gonna be, just like in Cyride. We'll think about it.
I was just thinking that if it was the same question, you could then add to the responses that we had on the feedback initially. I don't know how valid the ranges were on that first question, but we did have ranges, so
Did we?
I think so. I might remember wrong, but I don't think so.
Go ahead, Anita.
I'm sorry. I wonder if we want to use something similar to question 8 that talks about the 5-year capital improvement plan, and then the way that people can respond is very unimportant, somewhat unimportant, somewhat important, very important. And so maybe we just want to know, based on what those items are that are part of our climate action plan, how important or unimportant do people think that various aspects are?
So I think that's one part, but I just think that I'm trying to just asking the question, it would seem to be helpful for council to understand if there's not really a lot of appetite for people paying much for climate action initiatives in terms of increased property taxes, it might be helpful in our planning process. Now, this is coming back in September, but I'm just trying to see it. This would be an opportunity, since it's already going out to a bunch of people, to get some feedback. But if you're, I mean, it's less, are you somewhat interested? It's more or less, what's your appetite for paying? And that may be very difficult to come up with numbers. We don't want to necessarily scare people. But on the flip side, we all know there's going to be increased electric rates. There's going to be increased costs associated with potentially, property taxes and other paying for other initiatives. But I know it's very vague, but I just thought I'd throw it out because it's something that's going to be germane, and we're going to next time around would be another year before we get a chance to ask the question. And if there's no motion, I'll accept the fact there's not interest, and we'll just move on, and we'll call it quits for this one.
What if we got information that people didn't want to spend billions of dollars on climate action? What would we do?
I'd do it anyway.
Would we what?
I said, I mean, I personally would do it anyway.
Well, then why do we care about public opinion? Why do we go to all this work of finding out the desires of marginalized parties in our community if it doesn't make a difference whether we're going to spend billions of their dollars?
Okay, all right. I withdraw my
No, I would be interested in having a section on climate action questions in here. I'm not sure exactly, how to phrase them, or.
I mean, when we ask the questions about how much people, or if people are willing to spend more on all the different categories, how often do people say they want to spend more
on anything?
On anything.
Yeah, no, it's a good point.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just wonder about the timing of this too. If higher assessments are going to be going out, if we're raising our tax levy, I don't know whether people have a good sense of how much they'd be willing to spend.
That's fair. Yep.
So it may be difficult.
Yep.
Maybe we wouldn't have to deal with like a money question then, but we could have like, are you interested in any of the following sustainable actions, like purchasing an electric vehicle, installing solar, like composting, some different stuff like that? Or is that not useful for us?
My guess is there'll probably be opportunities to get more feedback from individuals, maybe even where there's more specificity as well too.
Okay.
Unless there's a motion, we'll just go ahead and put a pin in that one and come back to it sometime in the future if we want to. Anything else?
Any questions?
Are we going to remove any? Yeah, I was going to say.
My budget hearings.
Susan, I was curious if you find the ones about how people get their information that useful. So there's a whole table at kind of towards the bottom about how they get their information. Maybe it wasn't.
It's on page 7.
Yeah, page
8.
Yeah. When you need local government information, how useful are the following sources? Like, has that changed much in the past 5 years? The responses we're getting, like,
There's been a definite move away from traditional media to digital media.
Yeah.
The questions that we need to look at are probably on page 8. Moving away from Ames television and so I think there's some room there to
take a few out.
Yes.
Because I think we could kind of assume too on that one where we're asking how useful the different sources are. Like, we kind of all assume the trends is going more towards digital and less towards traditional print. But yeah, so I would move. I mean, can we just have staff whittle those away? Do we have to give specific direction?
Well, you could make a motion, we whittle it away.
Yeah, I would move that we direct staff to whittle those questions down
On page 8.
On page 8, in regards to preference for methods of communication.
For a second,
Second.
those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Were there any that was city council questions yet? Still there? What were the carryover for the city council questions?
The questions about trash, sorting your trash was one that was a carryover from last year.
Still there.
And then the sense of community and the health ones were added. They're not original. They were added probably 4 or 5 years ago.
I'm not sure who uses that now. Have we got any feedback?
Those were the ones that Healthiest Ames had asked for. And over time, that group has gone on hiatus.
The health category, it seems to me it's useful for us if we're going to continue with our mental health initiatives to have the input on that. I'm less concerned about eating fruits and vegetables and the physical health, the activity.
I like the community garden question in that section, or within that section, but the rest of them, yeah, no, I hear you.
So in the your health section, do you want a motion?
Please.
I would move that we cut question A, question D, question E, and question G.
Which page is this?
Pages
9 and 10.
9 and
9 and
10.
10. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Give me just 1 second.
Yep.
What are the questions we'd want?
A, D, E, and G was a motion, correct, Gloria?
Yes, cut those.
So it keeps the mental health question, the 2 mental health questions.
And the community
and
gardens.
Community gardens.
So we cut A is rating your physical health.
Uh-huh.
We don't want to know that.
What are we doing with it?
Yeah, that's.
I think it's a helpful data point for understanding our Parks and Rec program and understanding how people view their health. That's A. What's the other ones?
D, E, and G.
If we wanted to keep A in there, I wouldn't mind that. I think G, we're not doing anything with. D, we're probably not doing anything with. If we wanted to leave E as a open fill in the blank, I'd be okay with that. But I think cutting a few in this section is definitely okay.
I don't know what we're doing with the information. So the mental health components, I understand. Community gardens, I understand. The other things, and Tim, you make a case for Parks and Rec, but is Parks and Rec looking at that section?
No.
So it just seems like we're collecting data for the sake of collecting data.
I don't think
in
so. I
that
think that was
section.
originally for the Healthiest Ames.
Yeah.
Anita, any comments?
Not on that section. I would agree that if Parks and Rec was using this, I would keep E. But otherwise, if that's not being used, I would agree that could be eliminated. Those could be eliminated.
What would you support in getting more daily physical activity?
Well, that's different than your self-evaluation.
Okay. All right. Those in favor of the motion to strike questions A, D, E, and G, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Motion carried. All right. Anything else?
I wonder if under sense of community, I don't know how useful A and B are. I do think that C, with them having a chance to answer some specific questions, might be more helpful. So I wonder if, and D, so I wonder if those couple of beginning questions, A and B, I would be all right with eliminating.
I'll make a motion.
I move that we eliminate A and B under sense of community on
Page 10.
page 10.
Yep. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, move second in discussion.
But these are important things. I mean, we may not have a particular use at one time, but sometimes having longitudinal data about the connectedness, knowing the number of your neighbors is an important sense of your community. I went over and visited the neighborhood today where the school bus is located, and I talked with one of the residents, and I learned about how many of the neighbors she knew on her street. Her sense of community was super, super high. That stuff's good stuff for us to know. And so there may be years where we don't use any particular of these things, but don't we as a council want to have a sense of people's connectedness in their neighborhood and their sense of community? We want to know that.
Well, I guess the table that follows kind of asks pretty similar questions. And so I kind of thought maybe you could get that out of the questions in that table. You know, the one about feel valued as an individual, belong.
Yeah, I mean, under D, I feel I belong in this town. I am treated with respect. I think, but I'm okay with what people decide, but I think we do still get to some of those sense of community issues.
Honestly, I think B is more valuable than A is because we don't define what a neighbor is or how big that circle of neighbors is. It seems like the kind of thing that's easier to answer if you live in an apartment complex than if you live in a home. But you could, I suppose, just generically define your neighborhood, right? So B maybe.
Okay, so the motion is right now striking A and B. Everyone understand the motion? Those in favor of the motion say aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
All right, motion failed. Is there another motion?
I would move that we strike A.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Ron, would you second it?
Yeah.
All right. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion failed. All right. We good? All right. Thank you, Susan.
Great, thank you.
And we are going to take a 5 to 6 minute break. We'll reconvene at 8:30. All right. All right, council, I'd like to, we're going to do item 23, 24, 25, and we have some people waiting to hear on the ordinances. We'll go to item 32 and 33 and then go back and pick up item 26, anticipating that some of these might take a little time. So we'll go on to item 23, hearing on rezoning for master plan amendment 798 North 500th Street.
I think I'm really here just to answer questions on this. It's an amendment to a previously approved project, slight increase in units. The major change is to take a planned extension of a street north towards land that we intend to acquire as a park and removing that from the plan, which creates a cul-de-sac, but it's really the only option available with the intent of creating a park to the north. So if there's any other questions, I'll answer those.
Any questions for staff on this item? All right, declare the public hearing on this item to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic? Hearing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion on resolution approving the amended master plan.
Alternative one.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Okay, item 24, hearing on zoning text amendment for front yard parking and driveway standards. Questions for staff?
Just to follow up, so you have looked at this in July and October. Now you have the precise ordinance. We did have an outreach meeting last week. We tried to convey the input we got from some home builders and contractors about interest they have, and specifically the inspection process. Staff is supporting their recommendation to only look at an inspection for driveways at final permit. So they would be working at risk with no pre-inspection, and they understood that the logistics of pouring concrete with timing of inspections, they thought it was worth that. If they have a permit in hand and they can do what's on the permit, they thought it was worth their time and risk to do that. The rest of the standards are in there based on input from council. We try to give you some examples. If you have questions about how they will work, that's where I'm here to answer tonight. Ultimately, if we move forward tonight before third reading, I'll bring back what's called the driveway manual. So I'll take some of these pictures that are in here right now, and I'll make it a little bit more refined so that there is something comprehensive to go with third reading that as staff will use to administer the permits.
Any questions on this item? Has the people who are interested in this, have they had a chance to read the ordinance, or they just have given feedback and the ordinance has been crafted?
So we met with them, I guess I want to say it was last Thursday. So we had itemized out what the ordinance would include from our input back in October, and the draft ordinance has been available since Friday. So they knew that this would be on an agenda and that they would be available for review. And we haven't heard any other input since that outreach meeting.
All right, declare a public hearing on this item to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this item? Declare a public hearing to be closed. So just to be clear, that people were notified that this is available to look at. Is that what you're saying, Kelly? Or it was just posted and we assumed that they knew that was going to be on the website? I'm just trying to make sure that there's a lot of public feedback. I'm really encouraged to see a lot of public feedback, a lot of interest. And I just didn't try and connect the dots of the comments to What
So
was it in the
in
ordinance?
regards to the contractor outreach meeting, we said this item will be on the agenda for the 28th. I can't tell you, I said, and make sure go to the website
No,
at 5
no,
o'clock on Friday. So they knew you were going to review this item tonight and have final standards in front of you for tonight.
Okay.
That was communicated as part of that outreach meeting.
All right. All right, is there a motion on the first passage of the ordinance as included in the packet?
Move on first.
Second.
Okay, moving second, roll call.
Aye.
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 Okay. Number 25, hearing on zoning text amendment on lot standard related to minimum floor area ratios.
Again, this was referred to us to address an issue downtown with lot combinations in relationship to to minimum FAR. Allows for lot combinations, but it doesn't relieve you of non-conforming building status. So it still helps us ensure that we're getting what we expect for building alterations in the long run. It does allow for building remodels of existing buildings. So if there's any other questions, I'll answer those.
Questions for Kelly? All right, declare a public hearing on the zoning text amendment on lot standards related to minimum floor area ratios to be open. Anyone want to address council? Hearing none. Close the public hearing. Entertain motion on first passage of ordinance.
Move on first.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, we're going to skip ahead to item number 32, which is a first reading of ordinance revising section 283309 of the Ames Municipal Code to amend the industrial pretreatment local limits. John?
Good evening. Updating this particular table is a requirement of our discharge permit. So we have to do this every 5 years when that permit cycles through. You can see there some of the limits are being relaxed a little bit. Some are being tightened a little bit. It's all based on actual data over the last 5 years coming into the facility. We do not anticipate, based on the monitoring data of our industries over the last 5 years, expect that any of the changes would push anybody who's currently in compliance into a non-compliance status. And we did send a letter to all of our industries on the industrial pretreatment program, a letter. They got that about a week ago, and we've heard no comments back. With that, I'd answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, John. Any questions for Mr. Dunn? All right, open up public input. Is anyone in the audience that wants to address council on this ordinance revising 28.309 of the Ames Municipal Code on industrial pretreatment local limits? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Entertain motion on first reading of ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 All right, thank you. Item 33, entertain motion on second passage of ordinance relating to Ragbri events on July 24th to 26th, 2023.
Move on second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Very good. All right, we'll move back to item number 26, hearing on a minor amendment to Ames Plan 2040 for a portion of parcel located at 325 Billy Sunday Road.
So pretty quickly, we have a companion item for rezoning. I'm kind of going to talk about them together. So this is city-owned property, just over 20 acres of land. We have the animal shelter located here, as well as we lease land to the, I'm just blanked, Army Reserve National Guard. Which one is it?
I'm not speaking. I don't know.
That's the. Don't forget.
And then we also have the driveway that leads to Hunziker going through this land. So the Hunziker Drive is not a public road. It is a private drive through this site. So city staff has looked at this to look at future alterations to the animal shelter and possibly relocation of the animal shelter. And as part of this review, staff believes that we don't really need to retain all 20-ish acres of the site, and we could make available a surplus of possibly 10 to 15 acres. So we're proposing to change the land use designation from the comp plan from civic to commercial. And then the companion item would be to rezone that same area to highway oriented commercial. So with these actions tonight, you're changing the zoning. It doesn't inhibit the city's ability to use the land. You don't have to have government zoning for the city to do activities on the property. It does set it up for a future decision if the council is willing to subdivide the parcel and to sell land in the future. It does set up that action occurring in the future. So we've outlined that in the staff report. The land is not necessary for civic activities. It could be sold. It may have other things that are beneficial on the site in the future as well, but it's really about surplusing the land in the future, which would take a subdivision as well. So with that, if there's any questions about the land use designation or the HOC zoning, I'd be happy to answer them.
I have a question, but it's about the third reading we just did, item 34. Didn't you say we had to do something special with that?
We didn't do that.
We didn't do that yet.
We didn't do that
I
yet.
skipped that one.
You skipped that one.
We did not do that one yet.
Good.
I would have ran up here and jumped on the.
I just got distracted. Thank you.
No, I have a big circle around it saying do not
Wait.
pass this
Okay,
tonight.
good.
Yes. Yep. So again, land use amendment, first amendment to Plan 2040, and then the rezoning to HOC.
Kelly, is the eastern civic parcel, does that also include the Sunday Family Cemetery?
No, so I'll go to a clearer aerial photo. So the Billy Sunday Cemetery is
Oh, it's
over
way
here.
over there.
It's to the north of the dog park. So the cemetery itself is not on this parcel. The area that was shown retaining civic is a block of land that staff believes fits in is a prototype of a future animal shelter. That's why it's being set aside, just to keep it at government zoning. You obviously haven't approved any project for that site, but we're reserving land for it.
We might need more than that land there, so we may have to spill over into the.
Yeah. So at that point, when you get to a subdivision, that's when we make decisions about how much land is really going to be retained for an animal shelter and how much would be available for sale.
How would it work with that private owned road then? I mean, if you're gonna.
So we'll eventually, at the time of subdivision, we'll need to put a public access easement over the drive and define that as just an ingress egress easement to get to the Hunziker sports complex.
And you're saying that if for sake of discussion, the Hunziker complex would be expanded for some reason and could be using that property for city purposes, for additional recreation area or whatever, it still could occur even though it's zoned HOC.
Correct. So like commercial recreation activities are an allowed use. So once we make it commercial, we need to be consistent with that zoning. Commercial activities are allowed, parks are allowed activity. Offices,
it's very generous in terms of what you can.
Yep.
can
Yeah.
do.
There's a large range of things you could do here. It would really not be different than keeping it government if we were to continue to use or try to use the property differently.
Is there a reason, just out of curiosity, is the reason why you're retaining a small portion for civic for potentially, animal shelter, and why not just do all commercial or HOC and then just carve out that piece of land if you sell it in the future based on what you need? Or
I think we decided it was just better to show intent of retention of that area for the animal shelter rather than just make it all red and say we'll keep a piece.
Got it.
You could do it either way.
Got it. Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right, I declare the public hearing of the minor amendment on this of the Ames 2040 plan to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic? Declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain motion on resolution approving the amendment to the Ames 2040 plan, future land use map, excuse me.
Move approval.
Second.
All right, roll call.
Aye.
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 All right, item 27, Kelly?
Same description, just it's the first reading of the rezoning ordinance. So is there any other questions?
All right, declare a public hearing to rezone a portion of this parcel located at 325 Billy Sunday Road from SGA to HOC to be open. Is there anyone that wants to address council? Hearing none, declare a public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion on first passage of ordinance.
Move on first.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. And before you go, since I think you're essentially done, right?
Let's hope so.
I just want to clarify. You want us to table.
I would
Mark, maybe
say-
you want to, can you help us with this? I'll make sure I get this right.
Yeah, I would table it to April, where'd it go? April 11th is when I think we would be back with a text amendment regarding the parking question. So you could do third reading tonight if you just strike the reference to the parking ratio, or you could hold off until April when you've addressed whether you're going to change the parking ratio or not.
What's your recommendation, Mark?
I think it'd be just cleaner to just table it and move it to the meeting that Kelly suggested.
Okay. And then we can certainly invite public input at that time because it's been
Right.
amended.
Right.
And then go ahead and have third reading then. And it's not enough of a change that would warrant scrubbing it, starting over.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, the intent was to just acknowledge to the public that this would be an affordable housing site. We weren't trying to set any specific limitation. So I think that's the distinction here is we're trying to be transparent about a use rather than set a limitation of the use related to parking anyways.
And you said that the application for LIHTC credits is April 19th.
April 19th.
So this will not cause a consternation for the developer if he knows this is coming.
It should not. So, right, the ordinance would be if you do third reading on the 11th, it'll be published by the end of the week. Whatever other actions you take, we can all get that done. Anything I have to sign for them, we can get done by the 19th. So April 11th works from what I
Okay.
can tell.
All right. So we'll take that motion when in order, but just want to catch you before you take off. That was all. All right.
Okay.
Moving on to item number 28, hearing on 2021, 2022 shared use path system expansion, Iowa Creek. I see Mr. Joyner back there in the back. He's just itching to come up here and answer any questions that you might have.
I'm going to take a second just to, John, if you could come up just for real quickly. I think people are super excited about this, and I don't know if we have an opportunity to throw this up on the screen, but that's possible. I didn't ask you to do that in advance, so I apologize. We've talked as a community about the changes along Iowa Creek, and I think the communities should be very interested in this exciting development. And maybe John could just give a brief overview of what's to come.
Sure. I apologize. The exhibit I was given is in black and white here.
That's okay. You can still point it out. Yeah.
Giants here with the hand.
Okay, so this project will connect with the new Fifth Street that was constructed with the Fifth and Grand project. It will connect here. It'll go through the new wetland that was constructed with that Grand Avenue project, and then along the Iowa Creek bank stabilization improvements that we did last year. It'll connect up to the Grand Avenue Trail. It'll go under, or excuse me, the Duff Avenue Trail. It'll go under Duff Avenue and then along the creek improvements temporarily to the access road that goes back up to Lincoln Way, and then the shared use path up on Lincoln Way. And then it'll eventually, I see here the future path, connect to the Skunk River Trail once we get an agreement worked out with that property owner.
And this, you have a sense of, we have this in the Skunk River Trail and the CIP. I apologize, I don't remember that one.
We have the land acquisition in the CIP in order to buy enough to buy that parcel and then plan for, do the engineering for bank stabilization improvements. You can see the oxbows that are on the river here that will need to be stabilized for the trail project.
Yeah. And maybe just for context, could you bring the picture up? Does your map go any higher than Lincoln Way?
No.
So just for people's reference, that trail at Lincoln Way continues along the river up through East River Valley Park, all the way up to Innis Grove, which is
Right.
absolutely stunning. And someday, hopefully, it'll go even further north. But to be able to take that trail all the way south and then connect on the Iowa Creek, this is really a tremendous achievement for the city. So very excited for this. Thanks for highlighting that.
Sure, it'll be great. Thank you.
Any idea when those phases will be done, John? Is that in the 5-year CIP or?
We have the land acquisition programmed for this coming year. So hopefully
23, 24,
Yeah, so hopefully it'll take place here fairly quickly.
right after you get the land.
Right.
That's irrelevant.
Okay. All right. I declare a public hearing on this project to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council? Close public hearing. Entertain motion accepting reported bids.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or motion carried? And entertain motion on resolution approving final plans, specifications, and awarding the contract to Caliber Concrete LLC of Adair, Iowa, in the amount of $967,665.92, contingent upon receipt of Iowa DOT concurrence.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 All right, item 29. Any questions for staff on the Ames 2040 plan water utility infrastructure? Hearing none, declare the public hearing on this project to be open. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion accepting reported bids.
Move to accept the reported bids.
Second.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Entertain motion on resolution approving final plan specifications and awarding a contract base bid and add alternate to Thorpe Contracting LLC of Adel, Iowa, in the amount of $705,672.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Item number 30, any questions for staff on the pavement restoration slurry seal program?
Oh boy, do I.
Hearing none, entertain, declare a public hearing on this project to be open. Is there anyone that wants to address council? Seeing none, declare a public hearing to be closed. Entertain motion accepting reported bids.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Entertain motion on resolution approving final plans, specifications, and awarding the contract to Fort Dodge Asphalt Company of Fort Dodge, Iowa, in the amount of $210,646.60.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 And any questions for staff on item number 31? Declare the public hearing on the 2022-2023 shared use path maintenance project to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic? Seeing and hearing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain motion accepting reported bids.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Entertain motion on resolution approving final plan specifications and awarding the contract to Mid-Iowa Enterprises of Story City, Iowa, in the amount of $109,046. So,
Second.
roll call.
Aye.
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 And I entertain a motion to table third passage and adoption of ordinance number 4490 until April 11th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, we have two dispositions of communications. One is an email from Will Detterman, Main Street parking waivers for special events. Do you want to do anything with this?
I totally agree with him. Wasn't that the one where he said,
Parking?
yeah. Just that there
Just for
was
information only, or do you want to take,
plenty and
any?
we shouldn't supplement it.
Okay, all right. Number two is a memo from Kelly regarding a request for a 2040 plan amendment.
You suggested you put on a future agenda, we get a more lengthy staff report on it.
Move we put this on an agenda.
Second.
Okay, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Council comments. Well, Tabitha, welcome aboard.
Thanks.
It's been a very interesting meeting.
This was a
for you.
shorter meeting for us tonight,
Okay, got it.
just so you know.
Yeah. So,
Don't scare her off.
give us a quick 1 or 2 minute bio on yourself and why you're interested in serving as ex officio.
Okay, well, hi, I'm Tabitha Eaton. I'm a sophomore at Iowa State in Human Development and Family Studies with a minor in PR. I want to go into school guidance counseling and education administration. This is my first year in student government. I was a College of Human Sciences senator. I was slated in October. And I chose to go for this position because I filled a similar role in high school where I was our school district's representative. I didn't get to sit up at the fancy table, but I was there. And so I really enjoyed that. And since I do work in the area, and because I am in a somewhat of an education track, I have a lot of connections with the Ames community as well. So, yeah.
And you also were thrilled that she has volunteered to serve in the role all through next year too. So it's not just a 2-month fill in for Bryce, who did a great job, but
Mark has the contract ready for you to sign.
we did the orientation, and I think at least 5 times she said, "Yeah, I got this. I got this." So, anyway, so welcome aboard. We're just thrilled you're here, and I think she's going to already start working on talking to Jacob on getting a meeting scheduled, a joint meeting scheduled for possibly early April, and also we gave her an update on the role of Cyclone Welcome Weekend in the council and Iowa State. So I'm thrilled you're here. Bronwyn.
Yeah, welcome. I think that's all I have.
All right.
Nothing tonight.
Nothing for me.
We have had a number of emails regarding a situation where we have a resident living in a school bus. It's a used school bus, not an actual current one, used one. And this is causing a lot of concern in the public. And I just want to let people know that tentatively we will be having this on our agenda on March 15th. Is that correct, Mark?
14th.
14th. Yeah, March 14th. But I want to just make a comment. I really appreciate the way in which our city staff have attempted to work with the situation with great kindness and compassion. And I look forward to working through this matter. It's a difficult one. And people have an interest in this March 14th. Thanks.
I just want to welcome Tabitha.
Anita?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
All right. Well, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.